Okay, we are live. There's always that 30-second delay, but I want to make sure we have audio because it seems like whenever I do these live Q&As, I always mess up on audio for either myself or my guests. So, people in the chat, can you hear us? 30-second delay.
I should probably log into Twitch here too, so we can see some of these questions come across.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
We had some people waiting.
Yeah, I'm hoping we have some folks show up in the chat. Where's it at? Here we go. Boom.
There we go. They can hear us. All right.
Recognize the logo.
Yes. This ad supports Twitch. All right. Thank you. Thank you to those of us who have joined us so far. Hopefully we have some more trickle in. We're here with a live community Q&A, possibly the first of many. I don't know. We'll see. But with all these changes and all the things going on with the Zweihander brand, I reached out to Daniel and said, hey, would you mind sitting down and answering some questions and quelling some concerns and going over some misconceptions with the community and doing it live? And he said, yeah, of course. So we went back and forth for a few weeks here, and it's finally happening. So
that's right.
Welcome, Daniel. Thank you so much for joining me and the community here. We appreciate it.
You bet. I'm thanks again for extending the invite. I apologize if I keep touching my eye here, guys. I've got really bad allergies today. And the heat has been weird in Missouri, so I'm going to be constantly rubbing my eye and have to clear my throat.
It's all good.
Yeah, but thanks again for having me, Matt. For those who are kind of tuned in, Matt and I have been talking. I mean, gosh, almost like 6 months now, it seems like.
Yes.
And he's done some really cool videos for us through Growing Parallel Studios. We've got more in store in the future, and I like to consider us friends. So when this whole thing kind of went down with Andrew McMeel with the new publisher, Matt was the first person I talked to about it on Google Hangouts. Because we're tight like that, and I was like, "Hey, let's do something." So I guess that's why we're here, right?
That's right. And we have people in the chat already. So should we get started?
Yeah, let's jump in. Cool.
All right. Awesome. I got to go back to my questionnaire here. Okay. Well, I think this is the most appropriate one to open up with. With the what is it? Was it a purchase? Was it a partnership, an amalgamation with Andrews McMeel?
Great question.
Okay.
So this all kind of starts back. Oh my gosh, like last summer or autumn. My father-in-law is friends with one of the board members at Andrews McMeel. And when I ran my first Kickstarter, I mean, this has been like, 3-4 years ago, he was like, Daniel, you got to talk to my buddy down at Andrews McMeel. He runs a publishing company and you'd have a conversation, really smart guy. You work in advertising. Like, I think you'd be a good fit with him. I'm like, no big deal. I'll do it when I get around to it. And, because in the middle of Kickstarter and fulfillment and all the fun stuff that comes with that. For those of you who've done Kickstarters, there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes. So I kind of brushed it aside and turned to the latter part of last year. I finally decided, like, okay, let's have a conversation. Let me understand a little bit more about Andrews McMeel. Let me understand kind of about who they have underneath their roof. And I had a meeting with my chief editor, Patty Rice, Hugh Andrews, who's one of the board members, and that kind of led to a series of conversations with their new CEO, Andy Sarian, Fred Nelson, their chief development officer, and I kind of ran the gamut among all the executives there, just kind of talking about what I was doing, what I was writing, what I had on the horizon for Zweihander and Mongosh. This all kind of coincided with when Mongosh's Kickstarter was launched. So that kind of started this conversation around, hey, we would like to be your publisher. We've got a lot of, great creators at our table right now, including Matthew Inman. Coincidentally, he's in the Strand Theater, I think, tonight, talking about his new book. But he's, he does Exploding Kittens, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the oatmeal. I'm sure you know what it is. But nonetheless, they have all these great titles: Far Side, Calvin and Hobbes, Snoopy, Kathy, Garfield. I mean, they work in syndication. They do a lot of cartoons. And they're like, well, hey, we want to kind of make we want to kind of extend what we're doing. We think that there's an opportunity with RPGs, and we would like, to see what it would be like to publish Zweihander and Mongosh. I'm like, well, great, that's cool. Let's do it. So I wasn't an associate at this point of the company. I was just a creator. And as the conversations continued, after talking to the president, Kirsty Melville, and others, it turned into a pretty big job opportunity. So for those who may not know, I've spent the last 16 years in advertising. So that's been my world. A lot of business development stuff and publishing, with Zweihander and Mongoose, something I did when the sun set. It was kind of just a passion project, as a lot of, I think, creators can identify with. When the sun goes down, you work on your games. I mean, Matt, I know you can identify with this. Like,
oh yeah,
you put the kids down, and then it's like, oh, now it's RPG time. Let's actually do some cool stuff, right? But yeah, it's a time when you don't have to be a parent. You don't have to be a partner. It's like you time. So I would created my RPGs during that downtime, and my intention was to stay on strictly as a creator, but the opportunity was so phenomenal. That I had to continue kind of driving it. So, trying to see if there's actually an opportunity there to actually work for Andrews McMeel as an associate. And it turns out there was. It was a really tough decision because I loved what I did, I guess I should say now. Working in advertising, working with partner clients and growing their business and doing a lot of digital transformation projects was like my true passion. It had been my career for so long. But once the offer was there and the title and the opportunity, I sat down with my wife. We had a long conversation. There was a lot of back and forth to figure out, like, when are we going to do this? Am I going to do this? When is it going to happen? It all came together toward, I believe, the end of April. I accepted the offer. I put my notice in and came on board with Andrews McMeel. So they were already my publisher. So that relationship kind of is as it is. Groom Parallel Studios ostensibly has been, on paper, an LLC, but in truth, it's, a lot of us spread across the world. Matthew Pook, who's in the UK, Tanner down in Florida, Ken Duquette, who's up in the New England area, Dan Mandich, our lead artist, he's in Serbia, Adam Rose here in Kansas City and Overland Park specifically, Mike Bossler, our lead play tester, who literally last night we stayed here until like 12:30 talking about the Patreon, because they run the Patreon. Okay. And, we kind of are this kind of collective of people spread across the way. My apologies. I forgot to mention Milena Lakasevich, who's also in Serbia. So, Grown Parallel Studio still exists as is. The titles are being published by Andrews McMeel. The IP is still there and will continue to grow. So I guess it's a long way of saying that the choices that I made to join Andrews McMeel was driven not only by taking a very different direction in my career after 16 years. It was, like I said, it was a really tough decision, but also ensuring that what I had created and the community that supported Zweihander, the first Kickstarter, and even before then, back to Strike the Stun, and now with the Mongoose Kickstarter, to ensure that everybody, that was a good fit. Because that was the big question, was like, okay, this may make all these things have to make sense. It all has to line up perfectly, or I'm not going to do it. And it all fit together pretty well. So I'm actually 33 days in now at Andrews McMeel, and it's phenomenal. I mean, it's frankly, it's a dream job. I spent so many years focusing on business building, and now I get to focus on creating full time. I think this is kind of like, one of those when lightning strikes, you take advantage of it. And I think a lot of people don't get this opportunity, and I'm really fortunate that I have this opportunity now, and I don't want to squander it. So
you worked damn hard to get there. It's not like this happened overnight either.
Yeah, it took a long time, and I don't, and I had this conversation the other day I forget the gentleman's last name, but his name's Brandon. He runs Swords Fall Kickstarter. Phenomenal, amazing book. I'm super excited. I backed it immediately. He and I've had several conversations, and and at some point or another, like we were having this kind of back and forth online. And it was about like, well, how do you break into the industry? And for me, it was just writing and promoting, and I can't emphasize that enough. Like, it's you. Any creator out there, or somebody who runs Twitch or a Patreon or even a smaller thing, like you're kind of like there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of titles passing in and out of Drive-Thru RPG. There are a lot of things going on in the industry. It's easy to, when you see other people succeed, to be like, oh man, gets a little bit of FOMO, to get a little bit discouraged. But, in the wake of that, and maybe it's just my personality, I'm a little bit type A. Even when these things were happening, like when Cubicle 7 got awarded the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th Edition license, I was like, that's fantastic for them. But I continue to push, continue to promote, continue to create, continue to build audience, and continue to meet people where they're at. Meet your audience where they're at. If people are playing Zweihander on Discord, you need to get on Discord. If people are playing Zweihander on RPG.net, you got to get on RPG.net. But I wanted to ensure that I had built that audience and continue to push and push and push and push. And beyond that, it's also partially my background and my career, but it's also, a big part of it's luck. And I encourage anybody who is given an opportunity of this magnitude, you've got to pull the trigger, because these things, if you look at the industry itself, particularly creators today, these opportunities don't happen that often. No. And if it's in front of you, take it, absolutely take it. So obviously, with the caveat that is in favor for your family and good for
as long as it makes sense.
That's right. That's right.
It's a step up, or at least a plateau, so you can live comfortably. Okay, so that's right. Business as usual, then, we can say.
Absolutely, at scale. And this is the fun part, is that Zweihander before. So I think somebody had remarked earlier, like, what that dragon is. It's actually from WizKids. They do those, like the Illithid head and the Beholder and the dragons. The only one I don't have is the red dragon. But this has been, this basement, actually, this is the one that behind me and in front of me, you all can't see it, but this is where we kind of created Zweihander, in this basement. And I think it's where a lot of games start. In your game room, in your kitchen, at your buddy's house, at the library, online. And we talk about business as usual, and it's really weird to say that, because now I get to go to work, right? I have a desk, I have a cubicle, a pod that's mine, with a massive level of support within the organization across Andrew's McMeel, who work in the publishing and syndication side, and then I get to come home and work on stuff too. So it feels like business as usual, but I don't think it was until we put out our first video, and like today we did this huge standee for one of our author events this weekend. And then begin to saw like the amount of scale and distribution we have through Ingram's and Simon & Schuster and Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Target and Walmart and all this crazy stuff. It's business as usual, but at scale, at a massive scale, which will help Zweihander kind of evolve, not to a new edition, but to evolve horizontally, in the sense that the growth won't be so much focused strictly on Zweihander, but it will be focused on what else can we acquire and what other titles can we bring in to layer onto that and to make it a sustainable platform, in the same way that we think about the D20 system or RuneQuest. Right. I see, business as usual in the sense that I'm going to continue creating, continue pushing, but with the opportunity to turn it into a true platform.
Cool. So more Zweihander. We can still expect to see Tetsu Bow Peacemaker one day, maybe?
Yeah. So I'm actually going through my product roadmap now internally. It hasn't been fully approved yet, but keep in mind that, as an executive, and anybody who works at that tier of business. When you bring on a creator or you bring on IP and contracts, like it's complicated. To be completely straightforward, it's complicated because there's a lot of considerations. The way that a company operates versus the way you can operate as a creator. I've had to give up some of that control, which is good because it allows me to focus more on the things I'm really good at and let people who are really good at the things I'm not good at handle that. But part of that is understanding, what the product roadmap is, what is coming down the pipeline. As of right now, no changes to our product roadmap for purposes of Colonial Gothic. That's in 2020. That's a big one. Tetsu Bow 2021. We have several other products in between there. Like I mentioned before, it's still going through the product roadmap. It's not 100% approved. There's a ton of material. But my mandate is to ensure Mongosh and Zweihander are successful in 2019, leading into 2020. So that's been my focus for the past 30 days. So I think that as time goes on, I'll be able to more firmly commit to say, like, yeah, here's what's in the pipeline. Here's what we're doing 100%. Here's some other stuff that we're going to do kind of parallel to that. If that means we expand into board games, I don't know. If we expand into Roll20, I don't know yet. I'd love to. But there's a lot of other considerations that have influence over that we'll obviously talk about more later on. But yeah, I mean, business as usual to come back to where we started, but at a much larger scale.
Okay. That kind of ties in the next question. So with larger scale, you're part of a large company now. Will we continue to see the games crowdfunded, or are they just going to happen in-house now and be developed in-house? And
yeah, that's a really good question, because I think that, my initial thought around this was that we would use crowdfunding to take the temperature of the community. As an example, as an individual creator, my intention was to continue bankrolling the company through crowdfunding. Crowdfunding has been, the key there, save for pulling out of my 401k in some cases. But you do what you have to do. But I think the intention, working as an individual creator, was to continue using crowdfunding for that. I see that as possibly a potential. I think that the company line is that we're kind of they're trying something new. We are trying something new as Andrews McMeel Universal. It's very different for them. It's kind of a grand experiment, but we want to make the community a part of that to help us succeed and grow in ways that, that meet the expectations and exceed them in some cases with the community. So I think that crowdfunding is probably not necessarily off the table. I just don't know if that's going to be the approach moving forward. I mean, once again, there's obviously a lot of considerations there that I can't talk about. But nonetheless, like if you look at Paizo, if you look at everybody except for Dungeons and Dragons, obviously.
Yeah, all the big guys, they crowdfund. It's not unusual. So
that's right. Game on Tabletop is where a lot of them are going now too. But yeah, I mean, they use crowdfunding, and that's what the industry does. Is that what we do? Maybe not. Once again, the difference is, I think, looking at this as an outsider, Andrews McMeel has been a publisher for decades. They were started here in Kansas City, a homegrown company. Family still involved in the company. It's a group of about 150 or so people, and they've kind of owned the space. They've got a deep, extensive background in publishing. They got a deep, extensive background in syndication. So they've basically figured out what a lot of medium-sized RPG companies have trouble with, which is production and distribution, right? Those are the biggest costs. Those are the largest costs any company has to take on. So if you look at, I think it's Evil Hat. I don't think Evil Hat does any sort of international distribution at this point. I think they may work through like Asmodee, but they don't think they have like an Ingrams or Simon & Schuster relationship. But medium-sized RPG companies, have that challenge. In this case, Andrews McMeel doesn't. They've got that problem solved because they've been distributing books for decades.
Yeah.
So, that solves a lot of the bigger challenges I was facing as a creator, which I've certainly expressed, I think, before in Discord and on social, which is international shipping is so incredibly expensive.
Oh yeah.
But Amazon solves for that because we can do fulfillment out of Amazon UK or Amazon France. So it's like, is it like I'll just talk real numbers with you before I went on to Andrews McMeel, to ship a book of this size. It's 5.14 pounds, not including the batting you would put around it or the boxing or the box, the pick, pack, ship stuff that basically distributors do. This is like $60 to send to the UK. It's in some cases it's more expensive than the actual retail price of the book. Yeah. So that's why a lot of mid-sized RPG companies don't do international, or they find partners to do international with. And finding those partners is tough because you have to be at a certain level of scale to have that opportunity to distribute internationally. Modiphius has kind of been that agent in that space for a lot of companies. But nonetheless, Andrews McMeel solves for that. So, right to look, Paizo clearly has two. Paizo, I think they use Diamond is who they work for.
Oh, yeah, I believe they do. I think you're right.
Yeah, and I know that D&D, they've got. I mean, they work with practically everybody alive.
Hasbro, so they've got connections everywhere, right?
That's right. So. But I guess the point I'm coming to is that those companies are creator are I wouldn't say they're creator first, but they hadn't yet mastered the world of traditional publishing. That came along with them in time. That came along as time went along. So Andrews McMeel has it solved. So they kind of when I look at the business of Guru Imperial Studios, to get kind of inside baseball stuff here, guys. So we're going to talk about how the sausage is made. When you look at a business model, and in the case of Zweihander, like over 42% of its audience is not in the United States. They're mostly in the EU. There's a growing segment in Canada. Thanks, Matt. I know you represent all of Canada.
Yes.
But to be able to do fulfillment outside the United States is tough. It is really tough. And a lot of people who are kind of doing this on their own, like they're like, doing freelance line editing, freelance creation, going to Kickstarter. Cecil, Sword Peddler, who you all may know, he's been, he got a big chance to work with Rob Schwalb, I believe. And he's kind of doing RPGs full time. And, people like him and myself, when I was in that position, and others, like the challenges for the business is like, how do you fulfill the needs of the consumer? How do you meet the audience where they're at? How do you basically get this big damn book overseas?
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, this is a proof. I'll talk about that. This is not the real thing you're going to see, but getting this overseas is tough. It's very expensive because shipping. The bottom line is that we as small creators don't have corporate level discounts through USPS or FedEx. And those who do, they still work with distributors overseas. They still work through Amazon. They still work through Ingram's and Simon and Schuster and have distribution through that path. So, Andrews McMeel, in this case, solves for a pretty big gap in the business for myself, which was, how do I reach scale? Because the scale of which I've driven has been homegrown. But they've kind of got the collective firepower of the entire company to put to task to basically say, we need to get this into every brick and mortar, every 4,200 brick and mortar stores in the United States through GTS. We have to reach them. That can solve for them. We need to get books. We need to have Amazon backorder books. Backorder in the sense that they hold the books, meaning they've said, we want N number of books, and that's how many we're going to sell on Amazon. And then Amazon sells them for whatever damn price they want because their algorithms are weird.
It's been fluctuating ever since it went up there, right?
Yeah.
Start way up there and drop way down.
Yeah, and I have a very strong feeling once the book hits street date next week, that price is going to go right back up.
Oh, it always does.
Because Amazon will take a loss to sell books. But my point is that like traditional publishing houses can solve for the things that the RPG industry has a difficult time doing, not because of the RPG industry, but because they don't have the same level of business scale that Paizo and Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast has. So that's kind of what, is going to basically, bring us to, there's 90,000, I think there's 90,000 copies of Zweihander sold at this point in PDF and print format.
I thought that was revised. I was like, really? Already?
Yeah.
So that's all together.
That'd be amazing, right? Yeah. That's all together. That's prior to coming into Andrews McMeel Universal. So we're going to see, I think, in the next year or so, like how Zweihander can do in a broader market. And when I spoke earlier about like a grand experiment, I wouldn't call it an experiment so much as like, does this thing have legs? Like, can this brand extend to other RPGs? Because Zweihander's a brand. That once again, the inside baseball stuff here, guys, not necessarily the most exciting stuff to talk about, but from a business perspective, like when you create an RPG, it's a brand. You have to brand it. You have to market it that way, or if you want to create something that's sustainable. Now, granted, there's a lot of creators who make kind of smaller RPGs and continue to sell because there's recognition with them as authors. But nonetheless, somebody said, I think anyone in this chat knows inside baseball, lol. So, that aside, I guess that, my point is that Zweihander will reach a scale which it would never been able to do on my own, even with as aggressive as I was as pursuing partnerships to get distribution in the broader market. It's certainly good stuff all around, not only just for the company and Zweihander, but more importantly to people who actively want to buy the game and they don't live in the United States. Like that's awesome. And not only that, I don't have to be too concerned about like having to run another Kickstarter to get enough money for another print run. Like those things are solved for through working with Andrews McMeel Universal.
Awesome. Well, that kind of ties into the next thing. You have all these resources at your disposal now. You have this big company who's done everything. They've gone through it. They've learned the lessons. Are we going to see that these resources are going to help speed up the timelines on the books? And I think we've already seen it. We kind of answered that with the revised and main gouge. We've seen, like this thing's out in 2 weeks?
Yeah. So the short answer is yes. They are able to, at an alarming pace, because they have mastered it. Publishing companies have mastered this from acquisition to art design to layout and proofreading and printing and putting on the ship and dropping at the warehouses and distribution. That changes everything. Right. So if I look back, because I think it's important to always look back and identify, it's important to learn, and particularly with Kickstarters, because Kickstarters will basically, they're going to do one of two things. They're going to teach you about business in a way that you never knew before, and you will adapt and change to it, or it will break you. And I've seen a lot of great Kickstarters just fall apart afterward because they couldn't handle fulfillment. I would say that if I look at the first Zweihander run, the first Kickstarter back, I think it was 2016, I think, in August 2016, my initial thought was like, I'll print Lulu. I've got inexpensive shipping costs because Lulu prints whoever's closest to the purchaser through Lightning Source. So problem solved. The first proof comes in and it's a fucking mess. It's 60 weight paper. The black and white is bleeding through the pages. It's just ugly. And I think, and I know that people in the chat and those in Discord probably already know this, but I am a slave to quality. I look at other RPG books and I would never put any of them on my coffee table, save for a few handful of highly produced books. I wanted Zweihander to be the best quality that I could afford within the budgets I had achieved. So that first Kickstarter, I was like, okay, I cannot use Lulu. I cannot use Drive-Thru RPG for fulfillment. I need to do a traditional offset print run. And that offset print run took like, oh my gosh, like 12 months, which is I hadn't planned for, right? I didn't plan for it. I was like,
Right.
Lulu's going to follow because I didn't know shit. It's like my first thing I ever did, the first time I ever printed, first time I ever published. I mean, and that's how most people enter into Kickstarter. They just don't know. And the only way that you learn is by doing it. So after that first Kickstarter run, I think people got a really, really good book. And I have a copy of it here. This is actually a return table copy. That's marked table copy that was damaged in shipping overseas. But the quality of the first edition, it's a smaller book in dimension, but the quality is great. We use 70-pound paper, matte, soft touch cover, matted pages, ribbon, Smythe sewing, really good quality book. And I was like, all right, this is a book that I would not feel bad about putting on my coffee table and have guests ask about. So the lesson learned there was don't use Lulu for fulfillment. and the broader learning is that the expectations now in the industry have shifted in the sense that there's an expectation of higher quality than what even Drive-Thru RPG can produce, because Drive-Thru RPG, much like Lulu, uses the exact same printing network, which is Lightning Source. Now, granted, the quality of print will vary based on where you live, and Lulu and Drive-Thru RPG through One Bookstores have negotiated different templates, if you will, for quality of book they can do. That's changing, coincidentally, but nonetheless, like I feel, especially as a consumer of RPGs, that my expectations and many people's expectations now are to get higher quality books. So when I said, okay, I'm going to do Mongosh, I said, I'm going to go back to my original printer, talk to them. I'm going to do Zweihander as is, unaltered, just like this, just as it was before, with the original cover by Yussi Alaharo, because Dan Mandich's beautiful cover was going to be retired. So I do the whole Kickstarter, and I'm like, well, maybe I'll do some print on demand if people really want it. If they really want print on demand, that's fine, great, awesome. We'll do it, just kind of a gimme. Mm-hmm. So that led to more lessons learned, which is, I think a lot of people are actually in chat, particularly people who are talking earlier, want to know more about the Kickstarter stuff, which we can talk about, I think, later in the conversation.
Sure.
But, I mean, my point is that we learn lessons and we apply those lessons. And because of this weird confluence of events, and we'll talk about all the damn dirty stuff from like starting from the Mongosh Kickstarter to today. We apply those lessons and we have to learn from them. And do what we can to hopefully quell the frustrations, because it's not just a frustration for people who bought the book. It's an intense frustration for me. Anxiety over making sure that like what I promised to deliver is delivered.
Right.
But we can talk about that. So.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. There's a question in the chat we should jump on here. Is there an intention to do a mass print run of the GM screen, playmat cards, etc., and with the revised errata information on there?
Yes. The amount of cards we do and screens and stuff is still unknown. The intention is to do so, but the numbers have to work out, and I'll probably have answers to that in the next month or so.
Okay.
And if we do that, we will naturally update all PDFs with the newest material, because I think that it's in my mind, it's smart to do that. Like, right. There's an expectation. Once again, we talk about expectations of people who buy RPGs. You walk into a brick and mortar. Like, I go to Tabletop Game and Hobby here in Kansas City. It's actually in Overland Park, not far from here.
And you're going to be there this weekend, right?
That's right. Tomorrow.
Doing a signing. We'll do a quick plug.
Right.
Signing this weekend.
Hey. But I walk into the store as a consumer, a buyer of RPGs, and I'm like, what should I try today? What book should I buy that I really want to try at my table, or just read about, and maybe I'll never play it, but I want to at least buy it. right beside it is character folios, game master screens, cards, the whole 9 yards, at least with RPG companies who have the capacity to do that. And I guess the example really there is to say, Hasbro through Dungeons and Dragons. So why wouldn't we do cards in playmats and cards and things like that on a massive scale? It makes sense. It makes sense from a business perspective because it's what the audience wants. Will the numbers work out? We'll find out. I will say that I'm cautiously optimistic, if only because Andrews McMeel, they work with printers overseas. No big surprise there. If you look inside your book, you're going to get from Amazon next week. You're going to see that. But they have, this trope that's out there about like, Chinese printers are terrible quality. It's just not true at all. At least companies that are doing it right have quality control in place to enable that. So, these things that we print up Andrews McMeel, like the cards and things like that, would be be done out of the same printing houses where they're doing books and such. So yeah, I mean the long and the short of it is, yeah, I think it'd be great. I'd love to do that. I think it makes a lot of sense, but it has to make business sense too, and that is not yet been decided.
Okay,
but I should know in a month or so.
Cool. Well, to build on that, there was a prior question. Can we expect to see more Zweihander merchandise, dice, minis, T-shirts? All kinds of other goodies. Is that? I know it's early. Like you've been with them for 33 days officially now, so might be a little early for that.
Yeah, I would love to. And it may not necessarily be with Andrews McMeel who does that. It may be a strategic partner who helps do some of that. It's funny. Like I'm kind of having to learn to distinguish between like what I was doing before versus what I'm doing now. And before I was like, I need to contact the person who runs Void Merch to do like kick-ass Zweihander shirts. Right. In fact, I bought this shirt not too long back that says "Apparently I hate Dungeons and Dragons."
Yes.
And I was like, dude, you got to do a shirt that says "Apparently I hate WFRP because it's Zweihander." And because it's like it's this weird misconception, like, and it originates from 4chan. It's like, oh, if you play Zweihander, you must hate fucking Warhammer, or you made Zweihander, you must hate Warhammer. Like, absolutely not. I just bought the $750 Enemy Within whole package. Like, I would say Cubicle 7 and I are really fucking tight. There's and this is kind of a little off topic, but there is that perception that there's like this competitiveness between RPG companies, but that's I can assure you, even being new in the sense for the past 3 years in the industry, that's absolutely not true whatsoever. That's why you see writers and artists and publishers all kind of switching sides.
Oh yeah, they'll jump between companies and properties. Yeah, there's no like you sign exclusively with me and that's it. You're mine.
Yeah. Absolutely. But anyhow, it's totally off topic. But my point is that I think that merchandise would be super cool to do, but it's a matter of like, does it make business sense? Meaning, does it make sense? Are the numbers there? Could we generate? Could we say that there would be enough sales to drive that? Maybe it'd be awesome if there was. I mean, I would love to do like one thing I would like to do, because we're not going to have a booth at Gen Con, but I like to do like hand out stuff. Like, hey, here's some cool bookmarks, or here's some like cool little dice for you to take with you. They're branded Zweihander that you can.
You come over to this guy's table and hand some stuff out to.
That's right. That's right. But for now, as a matter of fact, I just got like 5 new Zweihander shirts printed, partially for this weekend's event with the author signing in Kansas City. And to answer the previous chat from Scartagaran, I believe. Yeah, I'm in Kansas City, Missouri, not in Kansas because Kansas is terrible. But no, seriously, there's a weird Confederate Union thing there, but in basketball stuff. But no, for real, we're in Kansas City, and so is Andrews McMeel. It's actually right in the middle of downtown. Sorry, Defenders of Cobalt. I know you. I think you're from Lawrence, if I'm not mistaken. Which, to be fair, I know some people may not know where this is, but I absolutely love Lawrence. But I have a lot of friends who are ready to bring torches and burn the town down again, because there's some really deep hatred between Missouri and Kansas still this day. Totally off topic, but yeah, we're in Kansas City.
There you go.
Yeah. So merchandise, yeah, it'd be awesome. So
That would be awesome.
merchandising,
Yes.
the Zweihander flamethrower, the Zweihander sword.
Yeah.
We already did that. We did the Mongosh knife. It's actually behind this door here. I've got these things already packaged and ready to go through USPS. But yeah, merchandise would be kick ass.
Cool. All right. Well, expect to see that in the near future, hopefully. So you are now your title is executive creator of games. Is that correct?
Yeah, executive creative director. It sounds really lofty.
Oh wow.
It sounds super lofty. But yeah, that's the title.
So as
So
part
go
of
ahead.
your role, you or your description you put out, I think it was on Twitter, was acquisitions. So
Yes.
will you be hunting for new and or existing games to bring on board?
Yes, with the caveat that the mandate is to get the house in order, and by what I mean by that is to make Zweihander and Mongosh successful, and the Players Handbook, which I'm so stoked about. We'll talk about that, but later. And I'm going to send you after this. I'm going to send you some artwork nobody else has seen, by the way. So
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Sorry, guys.
But yeah, acquisitions is certainly a part of that. You know, I'm going to be in Origins. If you're in Origins, seriously, we should talk if you're a creator, because I am going there first with a couple of people. One is Sierra Stanton. I hope she's okay with me talking about her. She's actually a mutual friend of Adam Rose, who worked at Andrews McMeel, and I didn't realize it until after I started there. But she's the art director on our books, so she does all the layout and design and stuff. And I'll be going there with another woman named Katie, who works on the acquisitions group with the editors. So we're going there to kind of scout things out at Origins in Columbus, Ohio. We're only going to be there for full day Friday and partial day Saturday. But part of what I'm looking for is to find artists, writers, basically to start gathering business cards and look for potential opportunities to get a hold of. I think, you know, any publishing company, or I should say every publishing company, I don't care if you're Wizards of the Coast, Andrews McMeel, Paizo, whatever, there's a lot of the work that you do, particularly as being an executive, is that you are always on the hunt for new opportunity, for acquisition, to in this case. But, you know, my mandate right now is to get things in order, to ensure that Zweihander and Mangosh are successful in the broader market, which, you know, that's my first and foremost concern. But nonetheless, I'm going to be at Origins, and I'll be there in my Zweihander shirt. I'll be at Gen Con. We won't have a booth at either of those conventions, but I am super excited to announce as of today, we just locked in a contract with Studio 2, who will be stocking Zweihander and Mongosh. Once Mongosh actually hits the street in September, they'll be stocking our books, so you can buy direct through them.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, good stuff overall.
You touched on acquisitions and bringing people on board and building a team. So the community has asked, can we expect to see some of the familiar faces come on board? They mentioned specifically Adam, Ken.
Yeah. So in a way, and it's not a direct answer, but what it boils down to is that there is an expertise within Guru Imperialist Studios, and once again, Guru Imperialist Studios is Adam and Mike and Ken and Diane and Milena and Matthew, or Pookie, as he prefers to be called, Tanner. All these people have all this like level of expertise that Andrews McMeel doesn't yet, who will continue to be leveraged for future work. So, including, as an example, like Ken Duquette, or Kenneth Duquet, as I prefer to call him, Lord Kenneth. He's still doing layout for us. He's a freelancer for us. So, Grim Imperialist Studios, the imprint, if you will, you know, this to look on the side of the revised core rulebook, you know, these people still are here and involved, 100%. they're not employees at Andrews McMeel Universal. It is my hope over time that we make some strategic hires, but those hires have to make sense once we've been able to show that RPGs are a sustainable line of revenue. And can show growth and scale over time, and that's kind of means that I continue to wear a lot of hats. But the people who currently work on all of this will continue to be involved very heavily. In fact, they just won't be. They'll just be working as freelancers like they were before, with contracts and fun stuff like that. But yes, my hope is over time that we bring on people, but only when it makes business sense. As an example, Richard E. Oreo, who wrote Colonial Gothic, he and I have spoken extensively about, how do we grow Colonial Gothic as a line? Does that mean he's a full-time freelancer for us? Does that mean we, I don't know what that means over time. Like, there's a lot of kind of unknowns right now, but ultimately what that means is that the people who work for Grim Perilous Studios before, the contracts I already had signed with a lot of these people, will continue to be involved because they have a level of expertise that Andrews McMeel simply doesn't have yet. And when it makes business sense, we make strategic hires. When that makes sense, once again. But right now, if I was to look to the future, I don't think 2019 is going to change that much. It'll probably be me solo at AMU, running the RPG show, if you will, because this will be the year we kind of make our big splash. Our big splash is going to be actually at PAX Unplugged, which I think is going to be an awesome convention for us to go to. One, because I've never been to PAX Unplugged. Two, there's a much younger demographic who goes there, and we've actually seen a lot of inroads to younger demographic now of people playing Zweihander. If I look at the demographic spread, it's mostly men. Surprise, surprise. Who are 93% of the players who play Zweihander are men, according to our demographics through Facebook. So my goal is to grow beyond that. And there are ways to do that strategically. It's these are the things that I've done in my previous history working in agency. Like, how do we begin to attract new audiences and speak to them in a way that's appealing to them? PAX Unplugged has a pretty even mix of men and women who attend the convention. Unlike Gen Con, unlike Origins or Gary Con and all those kind of like traditional conventions, I feel there's a strategic reason to make that our first big convention and to make our, to actually set up a booth and say, hey, we're Andrews McMeel, we're publishing some stuff, come meet the creators, come play the games, come get some cool stuff. But our intention is to make that our big splash. We're still kind of working on some things to get that lined up. I've spoken about that already on social media. Right. December in Philadelphia, as I understand it, it's very cold.
It's gonna be
I try to avoid the New England area, but having clients up there from my previous career, I kind of got accustomed to traveling a lot up there and being in really crappy weather. But it's all for the industry.
That's
stuff.
right.
I mean,
it's not Canada cold, but it'd be cold.
No, it's not downtown Chicago in January by any means.
Exactly.
It's to get that wind shear off the lake, and it comes through the city, just cuts through all the layers. But
exactly.
Yeah, I'm super stoked. I'm super excited. The opportunity to be able to reach new audiences. A lot of this has been enabled through Encounter Roleplay, coincidentally,
which just wrapped up.
Yeah. I think their last episode is Friday.
Okay.
And we're going to continue working with them on that too. I know that Will has some interest in doing something a little bit bigger. I can't talk too much about that yet, but something bigger than what they're doing now. And they've been instrumental in us helping reach new audiences. There's been a lot of new people who have been attracted to Zweihander, and not just like anecdotally from like people who are following me on Twitter, but like I've seen our sales numbers change and grow in our demographics on Facebook, because Facebook reveals all that to you. You can see the demographic spread begin to shift and change. So, and it coincides with when we started partnering with Encounter Roleplay to help promote Zweihander in a very new way. Packs and Plug makes a lot of sense because that's when we can actually, get out there and run some games. As I understand it, you'll be doing that at Gen Con Mad and have booked up all your games, which is super awesome.
Yes, I'm gonna wave that Zweihander flag. I'm the lone guy doing it.
Only if I can bring a Zweihander for you so you can wave an actual Zweihander.
That'd be even better. They're looking for the game and let's sit there swinging a sword around.
Yeah. That'd be great. Now I'll definitely see you there. I'm going to try to bring some goodies along with me. I kind of want to make a drop-in surprise to a couple of your games.
Yes, that would be awesome.
We're going to try to, and I think if I'm not mistaken, you and I are going to try to run a game on Saturday night.
I think so. We're going to talk about that after this. We got to hash out the details. It's one of the things I've written down that we have to talk about before Gen Con comes up. But yes, there was talk of a Saturday night game, so wait for an announcement.
Fantastic.
We got a question here in the chat regarding art. Did you know your original artists beforehand? If not, how difficult was it to trust artists you don't know to capture the specific visual style for your game?
That's a good question. I really like, I can appreciate where that's coming from, because there's kind of two sides to the story, right? It's one where like artists are like expected to work for free for exposure. On the other hand, if you're paying somebody money, you're hoping that they deliver what you paid them to do. I could talk about these stories in brief with Juicy Alharo. When I kind of got serious about turning what was at the time called Core Hammer into, it had no name at the time. It was Core Hammer. Before it became Zweihander, it was something else. I can't remember the name of it, but it was kind of like, we're like, oh, we'll just call it this internally. I had reached out to him because he had done the cover to Defenders of the Forest, which was a Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition fan creation. And I said, hey, Yussi, look, I really love the artwork you've done. Are you interested in doing a cover for Zweihander? And he was like, that'd be kick-ass, because we're both instructors done. We had interacted before online. And what I had learned is he was actually working for a gaming company as a freelancer. He'd done these super cool, like HEMA, if you're familiar with HEMA, H-E-M-A. All cat, it's an acronym for sword arts. He did all these really cool cards with these really neat illustrations of people using different types of, I don't know what they do, different sword fighting stances. Yeah, stances and fighting. And I don't know about LARPing or SCA or whatever it is to really speak with any sort of
authority.
Yeah.
On the matter.
But nonetheless, he'd been doing this in his spare time, and I was like, I would love for you to do the cover for Zweihander. And I shit you not, he's like, well, so what are you thinking? And I'm like, and you guys should look this up. I said, I want to do the cover of Zweihander to look like the front poster for the A-Team movie. Like that really bad movie with a really interesting cast. But I was like, I want to do that. And so he's like, yeah, the A-Team movie, like the movie, not the TV show, the movie.
I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah, and he comes back and says, we're not going to do it like that. Instead, we're going to do it like this. And he shows me this illustration, and this is literally like line format. And I was like, okay, yeah, I trust you. All right, go for it. And he produces this amazing piece of artwork that at first was actually, some of you may remember this. It was actually 4 men. On the cover, and we were getting really close to like finishing the artwork, and I was like, dude, we need a woman on the cover, for one, because my wife has mentioned it to me, for one, and two, like, we can't just do dudes on the front. Like that doesn't make any sense, because at the same time, in parallel, I was already talking to Diane, and I'll tell you why we made the decision to put the woman on the front, because it actually ties in the conversation with Diane. So Diane reached out to me randomly. I made this like random casting call. I was like, I'm really looking for some artwork. I'm willing to pay, obviously. Let me know. I was desperate. Like at this point, I was like, how am I going to get money for the artwork? And I was like, I started taking money out of my 401k to fund it preemptively before I even thought about going to Kickstarter, because this was literally a fan project. And Diane, like, he's like, dude, I did these like 3 illustrations for you. And the first illustration he did the very first illustration he ever did for me, did this for free. He sent it over to me. He's like, I really like what you're doing. I think you should consider me for your artist. And if you have the original book in front of you, the original, this guy, or the original Kickstarter version, it's page 663. It's the picture of this witch huntress, if you will, in the wizard, like the heretic on the stake and it's burning, all that stuff. He sent this piece of artwork to me and I was like, oh my God, that's fucking amazing. Like, that's so cool because like it for one, it reflected my game world, which was not Warhammer. Coincidentally, we always used the Warhammer rules, but we did not play in the Warhammer world. And I didn't give him any sort of briefing at all. That he just produced a piece of work. He's like, all right, yeah, boom. And I'm like, that's it. That's the look. We have to ensure that when we do the artwork, that it reflects my game world. And my game world is very diverse in sex and gender and skin tone and complexion and proclivities and things like that. So I was like, we have to do this in the artwork in the book. Like, it makes sense because if we look back, like, we're trying to think about like if we were to bring this to market, and it was really at this point where I was like, we're going to Kickstarter because I knew at the time that Warhammer 3rd Edition was out. A lot of people didn't particularly like it. I liked it. I've got the entire damn thing and actually got 3 copies, including every single product actually sitting on my shelf over here. I love it. But I was like, yeah, people really want to see a D100 Warhammer-ish game again. And I said, here's the opportunity to distinguish ourselves from Warhammer. Let's make artwork that doesn't reflect the in-world people in Warhammer, it's like, let's make it reflect the people around the table, the type of people we like to attract to play the game. Right. How can we make the artwork inclusive? And then it's like Dane just started producing just a ton of artwork, and I can't begin to speak about one, how incredibly professional he is, and how fast he is, and how great his artwork is. If you look back at Zweihander and you look at Mongoose, you could see even his artwork in Zweihander was still really good, and it's grown and changed and gotten better. Not to say that Zweihander's artwork is bad by any means, because it was still amazing then. But he's gotten much better and working at a much faster pace. You know, he works at the same pace. I like to joke about this. He works at the same pace that Korean animation studios do. He just cranks out artwork, and he gets paid well for doing it. And as this is happening, I was like, Juicy's like, well, we're so far in the process for the cover to be able to actually release the cover out to the public. He's like, I could probably do one character as a woman. I was like, all right, let's just do that. Let's just get that done so we can get this out there, and I can get my Kickstarter set up, and I can actually show the cover to people and be ready to rock. And that's how I locked in Juicy Alaharo for the artwork on Zweihander, and how I locked in Dan Mandich, who is, I mean, he is when we think of Zweihander, he's the guy. Like, yeah. Without his artwork, this would have never happened. It would never happen because, you know, artwork is a big driver for RPGs, and it has such a particular look and feel. And because we wanted to use just one artist, it had continuity in the way that a lot of our other RPGs didn't, because he illustrated end-to-end. He did 425 illustrations in a 668-page book. I mean,
it's insane.
It is. And, you know, we joke, like, we look back and we're like, where did you find the time to do this? And he told me this funny story. He's like, so he's in Europe, and they take they're off work for all of August because it's Europe. And he's like, I went to my cabin, I grew my Zweihander beard, and he'd only come down from the cabin like once a week because he had no internet service up there. So he'd sit up there and draw and illustrate and read and write and play games. And that's how he created all the artwork for Zweihander. He did a similar thing for Mongoose. And you know, he, without Dan, I mean, he has defined essentially the brand standard from an illustration perspective for the Zweihander line. And you know, I trust a man implicitly. I'm trying to convince him to come to the States and, you know, like, hey, let's actually meet face to face. I never met the man. We've talked a few times on Twitter when my son was first born, or not Twitter, but on Skype when my son was first born.
Okay.
But we talk on Google Hangouts every day. We talk by email. You know, that's our line of communication. He trusts me. I trust him. I pay him on time. I pay him well. And, you know, for somebody who's a freelancer, that's obviously important. But he's not the only artist in our stable now.
Right.
we look at Mongosh, Juicy Alhario unfortunately wasn't available to do the cover. He at the time, I'm pretty sure he was like working on some pretty big project that was it was taking too much of his time. So I was like, oh man, okay, well let me find somebody else. So Ken Duque reached out and was like, hey, I'm a fan of Zweihander. I do artwork, but more importantly, I do layout. I'm like, well, shit, we need a layout artist because at this point, Milena was kind of disengaged because we were looking at like we wanted to do new layout standards for Mongo. Zweihander was just kind of sitting there as it was. And Ken, not only did Ken do a ton of artwork for all of our cards, including a lot of our art design layout in the books, but he did the cover to Mongosh as well, which is a full wrap cover. It's a super, super cool image. And, Ken and I have a very tight relationship. He is kind of, our go-to for all art direction now from a purposes of layout standards. He comes from a print background. So, he in a way kind of filled in a gap in my own ignorance of how books are laid out. And he's like, hey, here's how I'd improve Zweihander. If I was to do into your next book. So he did some stuff at Dark Astral. He did the illustrations inside that, which are incredible. Because if you're a fan of a French artist named Mobius, who just passed away, I believe, last year, Dan's got the same art style. It's so fucking cool.
Yeah, Dan's art it's awesome.
Yeah,
and he's hilarious, and he's like an enigma because I refer to him as the elusive Ken Duque because just like he'll appear out of nowhere after like 6 months of not being around, and all of a sudden you get a comment or email, and you're just like, hey, where have you been? Yeah, his art is so good.
Yeah, it's super cool, and I've spoken to him extensively. Like, I want you to do the artwork for Tetsu Bow, and he produced the first kind of images. But to step back to kind of where how we established a level of trust was, once again, people don't work for exposure. You're going to pay people, and you build up a trust. And I've kept my Zweihander's group of artists small purposefully, because you can't, managing that many people is tough. And being, having come from a creative background myself, not as a writer, but as a painter. People probably don't know this, but I went to a performing and visual arts school and was a painter. That's what I did in my youth. I haven't carried that forward, but being left-brained in that sense, like I understand that it's tough to manage people in that sense. You have to give them enough room to breathe, and managing a bunch of creatives is tough. So I made the choice, like, keep the group of artists small, pay them well, pay them on time, give them a lot of work. And hold them to their own, and hold them to high standards. And between Ken and Juicy and Deanne, I mean, they just continue to blow my expectations all the time. I really hope that we can bring Juicy back on at some point to do some artwork for us. His stuff is really cool. He works mostly digitally, but it looks like it's hand painted.
Mm-hmm.
I love his colors. I love the evocativeness. In fact, you'll see his artwork back on the cover of the Players Handbook. It actually is it's a piece of art where he actually intended for Mongosh initially, but we said that's not the right fit. So
it's a good image.
Yeah, so he's kind of back in the mix in that way of an older piece of art that he did for us, which is also a wraparound image. But nonetheless, I trust these people implicitly, and they have helped define the standard of illustrative quality and continuity throughout the book that you come to expect. And Ken, in particular, from a layout perspective, is really, and he's, to quote the dude, that regularly tied the fucking room together. Like he is the glue. He is the kind of the silver thread that binds it all together, and has changed the way that we envision all of our layouts in our books. And that's a larger part of the bigger Kickstarter question about where's my books.
Do we want to jump into that now? Do you want to?
Yeah.
You want to touch on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We feel it's a natural segue. So this is a bit of a long story, so bear down. But I promise it's interesting, and once again, it's the 100% unfiltered truth. So Mongosh Kickstarter happens, and the expectation was to do Mongosh and to print Zweihander completely unaltered, black and white, untouched. Literally go back to the old printer, our printer here in Kansas City, Bob Audley. Yeah, right. Long stories. I'm the king of that. Sasha can attest. He and I have had a lot of conversations. By the way, hey, Sasha, he actually, some total side note, he helped us transcribe a lot of the book back from PDF into Google Drive format, cool. Which is going to be super helpful when we do our next SRD, wink, wink. But that's a story for later. But no, we intended really we're going to do Mongosh. We were going to do it in black and white. We were going to do it just like we did Zweihander. And I think it was about after we had finished the Kickstarter, it was about November. I think it was November. And we were heading toward our deadline. And we're like, well, we can probably get this print done and shipped out by January. And a series of conversations happened between Ken and I. And this is not Ken's fault. This is Dan's fault. So blame me. I was like, Ken, what would it take to do like a second color? Like, what if we did sepia tone on the page numbers and redid our tables? And he's like, well, let me test it out. So we hadn't budgeted for any of this. This was not in the budgets for Mongosh whatsoever. And for those of you who don't know much about printing, moving from one color, which is black and white, to two colors is a leap of about 37% roughly in cost for print. So I'm like, this is going to cost me, but I want to see if this is an opportunity. Can we produce something that's even better? And Ken's like, here's what we'll change in layout. Here's what we should do for sepia tone. And I think I threw some images out there, and we did some kind of like community votes on Facebook.
You did, yeah.
Yeah.
On Twitter and everything, yep.
Yeah, and then I was like, all right, we have to do this. Like, if we don't do this, like we're doing Zweihander, or doing Mongosh a disservice. And then the question was, he's like, well, Dan, are we gonna do that for Zweihander? I'm like, we have to, right? We can't just like create a better quality book and then like still have the same Zweihander. And plus, Zweihander was already sitting out there with misspellings in errata, which we are intended to wrap in the errata and fix the misspellings, but there were like rule changes that we had adapted that we wanted to get in there. I mean, there's probably like 10 pages of errata. Mm-hmm. And we had the original files from Elena. And we're like, all right, well, if we have to do this, it has to start from the ground up. We have to basically lay out the book fresh. We can use some of what's there, some of the framework, but we have to do it from the ground up all over again. And I was like, okay, let me think on this. I thought for about 24 hours, and I was like, well, do I deliver the same book and then give a better Mongosh and then have people come back and say, we want Zweihander this format, and be like, I'm sorry, I need another Kickstarter? Or do I bite the bullet? Do I continue adhering to my philosophy of slave to strong design and quality and delay the shipment, delay the books? And the answer, love it or hate it, was we have to do this. We have to do it. And it was a no-brainer once we started working on the files. So, we end up with the Zweihander Revised Core Rulebook, and we finish this out. And we're like, now we have to start laying out Mongosh, because we had to start with Zweihander to get it all right. Because at the same time, this is happening, the Andrew McMeel conversation was happening with, we want you to be a creator, and we want to print your books and make the street date in June. And I'm like, shit! Like, I got Kickstarter sitting out there that I still have to fulfill. If we do this, we can't do Mongosh until later in the year. Meaning, people who back the Kickstarter have to get it months in advance. And I was secretly hoping that we would have prints ready for Zweihander well in advance of this June street date, which is next week. Unfortunately, it didn't come true through a series of, there's complications in the sense that print costs came in way higher than expected. The print lead time in December was not the same print lead time as now. It's yearbook season, which impacts a lot of small print run companies in the United States, specifically ours in Idaho. So we're like, now we got like a 2-month lead time we need to print. So that means by the time Zweihander gets done and printed, it's going to be July. and it's like, well, shit. Like, what do? Do we ship Zweihander out on its own? And just get it out there and give them the copies of Andrew's McMeel and abandon the print? And the answer is no, we can't do that. There's no budget left. Right? Because we already had made a 37% jump in production cost to move to sepia. And we weren't in the red, but we were really close. And the numbers still aren't finalized at this point. I still haven't written that final check. But that'll happen quick. That'll happen, I think, next week. So we're already kind of like dipping pretty deep in our margin is like it's super slim at this point. So the decision, once again, the decision is that we gotta package it all together, ship it all together, and ship it all at once. It's what we promised in the initial Kickstarter. We hadn't anticipated doing 2 colors, sepia tone, and plussing up the layout and adding even more artwork into Zweihander. And we never anticipated. We didn't think that was even in my mind when I did the Kickstarter. But, like I said, to come back to where I started about a half hour ago, it's like every Kickstarter, every time this is a lesson learned, like we have to apply these lessons and move forward. And it was a sacrifice that I feel, even though it stings, it's frustrating. It's frustrating for the community. It's frustrating to people in the chat. It's frustrating for me personally because I feel like I'm kind of breaking a promise. But on the same token, like what is going to be best for everyone is to come out with a much better produced book. We want super high quality because this is meant to compete in the space. It's meant to stand alongside DCC, stand alongside Pathfinder, stand alongside Astonishing Swordsman. It's meant to stand alongside and to stand out. And I feel very strongly, particularly Matt, I know you can identify this, and you may be, obviously, your opinion may be different than others who haven't seen the book yet, but the quality of the book is night and day difference between the originals.
It doesn't even compare. I don't have my print on demand one near me, but it is. When I got it, I was just flipping through it. Like the feel of the pages is crazy. Like the finish on them, the color, the gloss, the bookmark, everything about it. It is. It doesn't even compare to the old one that I have at all.
Yeah, I really feel that that people will be very, very pleased to think of these books, and they'll still feel a little bit frustrated that it wasn't delivered on time. And I get that. I totally get that, and I'm very sorry for that. It sucks. But I think I said earlier today in chat, like knowing that some people had backed the main Mongosh Kickstarter and ordered an add-on for Zweihander. If you want to get the book on the street date next week, reach out to me at daniel@imperialist.com. I will refund your cost of the Zweihander book, and you can go buy it on Amazon, or you can do whatever you want with the money. It doesn't matter. It's your money. But I feel I at least owe that as a minimum to the community. Because I want to do right, obviously, but more importantly, I don't want to burn any bridges. Because without the community like this, none of this would have happened. As a creator, the first Kickstarter, with the second one with Andrew's McMeel. So if you want, like I said, if you all want to get the book sooner, which if you want to, you can do that. Just reach out to me by email, and I'll refund your cost on the Zweihander book, and we'll make you square. And then you could go out and buy them on Amazon, get it next week, or you can do whatever you want with the money. It doesn't matter. It's your money.
Which is very classy, though. That's huge, because not a lot of companies and people would do that.
Yeah, I think it's maybe I don't know, maybe it's just the way I was raised. Right in the Midwest, and we're 1, loquacious, 2, overly polite, and 3, it's I think just the way that my family raised me. Like I've always been raised to be honest and truthful, and to do the right thing. And I feel this is probably the right thing to do. And it may not satisfy everybody, but you're never going to. Not everyone's always going to be happy at the decision you make.
No,
but I mean, if you look at the number of Kickstarters that have crashed and burned, where the creator disappears in the middle of the night with the money because they end up like running out of budget because they don't know how to run a business. I won't mention him by name, but there's a gentleman in Lawrence, Kansas, actually, who has a RPG that's 7 years late. And he actually teaches at the university no more than 2 blocks from where I live. So, and I even offered to help him bring it to completion. So, being somebody who's backed a lot of Kickstarters and had a lot of friends who back Kickstarters and seeing Kickstarters fail time after time, you can take those and apply those lessons to your own business and own businesses in Grim Parallel Studios, me as a creator at the time, and to remedy those things. And that's the best way I think you can help remediate the situation. But ultimately, our Kickstarter, everything from Kickstarter at this point will be ready by mid to late July, and we'll start shipping them. We're working with Magpie Games to do all of our distribution. I don't know, I can't remember precisely where their shipping house is out of, but the intention is to take the print-on-demand products for cards, chat books, all that stuff, send them there. We've already committed to upgrading all print-on-demand versions of Mongosh and Zweihander to offset. So this offset version of Mongosh, which looks kind of cool, is actually a print-on-demand version. We're upgrading everybody from print-on-demand to an offset book. So you're getting offset.
Awesome.
We wanted to do that. We're doing the same thing for Zweihander. So no more print-on-demand Zweihander. Everybody who ordered print-on-demand is getting an offset book. We have offered coupons and refunds to people who originally backed at offset to make sure that everyone is satisfied. Because once again, there has to be parity, right? Because people who are paying $60 for offset versus $45 for print on demand, we made up the difference either in free product or just giving them a refund by PayPal or Stripe. All those products are going to be printed and moved up to Magpie Games distribution center, and then they're going to package it all in a box and send it out. So that process for pick, pack, ships usually about 2 to 3 days. If I'm looking back historically at the way that it worked with my previous distributor, who I will never go back to again. It's a whole sordid story. We had like a 5% return rate. It was terrible. Anyway, lessons learned. The second time around, we found the right distribution channel to help do pick, pack, ship for us. And they're well known in the industry. Mark, the guy who runs the company, was the president of the IG. He was with the IGDN for quite a long time. Very dependable, smart dude. We partnered with them to do all of our distribution. So I think that what's going to happen, were I to, it's no longer like through the looking glass and the crystal ball, when will it happen? Instead, I feel very confident, 90% confident that all of our printing will be done by mid to end of July, and shipping will begin shortly thereafter. So products should start landing in people's hands by early July.
Cool.
End of July, early August. So in advance of our September street date for Mongosh, certainly a month later than the Zweihander street date. But once again, I'm going to do I'm trying to do what's best for everyone. And if for some reason you're dissatisfied with that, just reach out to me. We'll work it out. We'll figure it out. And that's to anyone. I've gotten some really polite emails. We got some very frustrated emails, and practically every one of those conversations have turned to a positive experience, I feel, for people who have purchased or backed. So
good.
Yeah, I mean, look, like I said, we all know a lot of people who back Kickstarters, and like the creators just kind of like peace out, like they ran out of money, and they're like, where the hell did they go? Why aren't they taking care of me? Why are they ignoring my messages? Why aren't they responding to me? We purposely set up a Discord so we had a direct channel to the community. We didn't have that before. Like the first time around Zweihander, we didn't have that. I mean, looking back in retrospect, we probably could have caught some errors by doing that. But we did that for this Kickstarter and Mongosh because we wanted a direct line outside of social media, outside of email, like on demand, be available, talk with the community, answer questions, be there, be present in ways that a lot of other companies are not. Because, a lot of companies just don't spend the time to interact with the community in ways where they're most active. They use social media and schedule out their posts, and that's what they do. But that's not the way that I want to operate. It's not the way that I can, and it's not the way that I want that I feel that AMU should operate. We should operate where we're still embedded with the community, still interacting. I'm still an open book. There's clearly things I can't always talk about because it's it's behind closed doors, and I have a responsibility as an executive to safeguard that. But on the same token, like the things I can talk about, I will talk about. For the Kickstarter, from AMU's perspective, the Kickstarter is nothing to do with them whatsoever. And I should make that perfectly clear. It's nothing to do with Andrews McMeel Universal. This is an arrangement, an agreement that predates my relationship with them. And this is not just bullshit talk, but this is straight truth. That is my own commitment to fulfill, and Andrews McMeel has nothing to do with that.
Very good. I just linked the Discord in the chat.
Oh, cool.
So people can jump on over. You mentioned it.
Yeah.
The whole team's there. The whole creative team. So you can drop in and they will answer your questions. We're coming up on an hour and a half. How much longer do you have? Did you want to do another half hour?
I've got all night.
All right. We'll keep going then. Yeah. You mentioned print on demand. So that's tied to Drive-Thru RPG. I did get a question from someone who is currently creating for the Grim Perilous Library on Drive-Thru RPG, and they wanted to know, with Andrews McMeel, is this going to bring any changes or anything to the Grim and Perilous Library? Is that going to disappear, or business as usual with that as well?
Great question. So I will first start by saying that many publishing companies that operate with IP, they protect and safeguard very, very closely. Andrews McMeel, unlike a lot of other publishing companies, they put creators first. And I know that's kind of a weird thing to say, because usually what happens, like if you work with companies on the coast, publishers on the coast, once they get your IP, they make all the decisions. As a creator, having a creative relationship with Andrews McMeel before becoming an associate, it was made very clear to me that as the creator, I had control over what happens with the book. As an example, when I came back and said, we're not doing black and white, we're doing sepia, they're like, okay. So they reran the numbers and said, we can do it. When I was like, hey, I want to do a rounded spine, they said, cool, let's do it. And that's the way they operate.
Oh, it is.
Now,
I didn't even notice.
Yeah. And now that I'm an associate, because, all the fun production stuff. But now I'm an associate, the question is, what happens to the Grim Perilous Library? Because it is technically IP. Mm-hmm. It is a registered trademark. There's copyright around it. And what does that mean for the library? Well, it means a lot of good things, actually. So the cool thing about, one thing that I kind of envisioned with the library initially when I approached Chris Tang at Drive-Thru RPG was that I wanted to basically create a pathway for people to create stuff in one area that could be shared out without having to worry about being, struck by attorneys up on high from space, Games Workshop, or Hasbro, or whoever else. I was like,
satellite shoots you.
Yeah, I want to open this up to the community. I want them to create content and not feel afraid to distribute it. And I want to allow them to be able to actually make money off of it. Because how cool I look back when I was kit bashing D&D stuff in my early 20s, I'm like, holy shit, if the OGL had existed at that time, I would have been like a kid in a candy store. And in Drive-Thru RPG's community content program, the first one was DM's Guild. And I was like, I want to do that for Zweihander. And it really took getting to, now adamantine, these adamantine level as what Zweihander's at on Drive-Thru RPG. It took a lot of sales really to get to the point to say, hey, Chris, CEO of Drive-Thru RPG, can I do this? And he's like, yeah, you absolutely can. Get your terms and conditions straightened out. And he's an attorney himself. He's like, get your terms and conditions straightened out, write everything up, name what you're going to name, what's going to be, and we'll do it. So a very, very lively community of people. There's now 67 creations there. And my objective with it was my dual objective was only just allow a place that people could collect all of these things together and sell them together and build off of it. Because I'm sure for those of you who are creating and are currently active in our Discord through the Grim Perilous Library channel are working together on things, which is super exciting to see. A collaborative creative effort, but also the dual objective is to identify writers and to say, let's elevate this into printed material. It's the same thing that Dungeons and Dragons is doing. You'll see that a lot of people who claim online, they're like, I'm a writer for Wizards of the Coast. They are, because they're writing for the DMs Guild. And some of those books actually go to print. They actually say, this is good, this is bad, we kind of like this, let's dive in a little bit deeper on that. And they will bring these things to print and sell them. So my dual objective was to identify other potential writers and find partnerships and work on things together. Back to Andrews McMeel, very protective of their IP. They said, this is a fantastic idea. The Grimm Press Library makes a lot of sense for us because we can then identify writers and create more work and be able to produce more content, because obviously the key for any RPG company is to produce a lot of content. So I see now with the Grimm Press Library and Andrews McMeel, like kind of being this kind of fulcrum, like we have a bigger opportunity to go back to DriveThruRPG and say, I think we want to do this in print. I think we want to do some stuff in print with some of these creators. And it may be in print on demand. It may actually be offset. I don't know. I mean, it's still kind of unknown. But I do feel confident that the Grimm Press Library will exist as it is now. It will enjoy the scale of which AMU brings to all of Zweihander. And I feel over time, the contributions will become larger, and we will probably see some creators that are currently working in there approached at some point via acquisitions, part of my role, my mandate, to work with to do something bigger than what's being currently created there.
Awesome. Exciting for those people and anybody who's looking to get into that. Huge opportunity.
Yeah. And I think what's, if any of you are at, in the Grimm Press Library on that channel in Discord, that there's a lot of activity, and there's kind of like this kind of community project going on right now called Relay Arisen, which is like a bestiary that people are kind of working on together to kind of see if it has some legs. And I think it does. I would envision probably bringing that to print if it comes together in the way that I'm kind of thinking it will. But more importantly, I'm telling you now, the DMs Guild is flooded with creators. Why? Because D&D is the most popular RPG out there. Mm-hmm. So it's really hard to get noticed on the DMs Guild. It's not difficult to get noticed on the Grimm Press Library because there are only 67 creations. And if you look at the creations that are out there, a lot of them have really good meta rankings. Some are copper, some are silver. I think there's actually one gold in there now too. And that's really, really rare if you look at other community content programs on DriveThruRPG. So if you're a creator, I know I'm a bit biased because I created Zweihander, but the Grimm Press Library is a really good place to bring your work to because the audience is still small enough to pay attention to things that got put in there. If you look at the DMs Guild, there's like 20 products a day practically that go in there, and and a few people will stand out and sell, but nonetheless, like, not to discourage you from working on the DMs Guild by any means, but the Grimm Press Library is still small enough to where you can make a difference and get noticed.
You can stand out, and people are hungry for content. They want more.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Speaking of DriveThruRPG, you hinted at something on Twitter, and I had no idea. I was right before, I don't know, like 2 hours before we went online, that you're going to talk about something that they have planned for PDFs. I have no idea what this is. You dropped it in some thread.
Oh, I did, didn't I?
I don't know what it is, but I just remembered it while we were talking about DriveThruRPG.
Yeah, so I will. So DriveThru, what I can tell you is DriveThruRPG has reached out to a small number of publishers to re-envision the way that we consume PDFs. I was chosen as one of those publishers, as well as others that you probably know. Their books on your shelves. And there is an initiative that they will announce in time that will speak to that. I can't really talk any more about it, but the point is that I think we can all agree that the way that PDFs appear on our phones and tablets is not ideal. That's going to change. So, and DriveThruRPG will be that change agent. So, pay attention later this year after summer.
Interesting. Cool. All right, my interest is piqued. I hate reading PDFs. I order everything print on demand or physical. I have to, especially with games. I find you have to
Yeah.
flip back and forth when you're learning and reading a game for the first time. There's no just you don't read it beginning to end. There's always jumping back and forth. In a PDF, I can't do it. It drives me crazy.
Yeah, I use PDF on my desktop, but certainly not on my phone. And I know that. So one of our lead playtester, Mike, the boss Bossler, he brings a tablet and he has the PDF on it, and he's like scrolling through it, scroll to find what he needs to get. You know, even there's a book sitting beside him. You know, and we all like you know, from not a marketing perspective, but from just a general like business perspective, like it's always ideal to meet audiences where they're at. If the audience is using tablets at the table, you need to create things that enable use of that. D&D Beyond is a perfect example of that. It's a shining example of how Wizards of the Coast, or Hasbro in this case, is re-envisioning how people interact at the table. Physical books still exist. People still buy books. Book sales and RPGs are not going down, despite the fact that digital tools are being developed. And I think that you will see across the industry, as companies begin to catch up with Wizards of the Coast, that there will be far more digital tools as time goes on. Now, companies like Roll20, Fantasy Grounds, Astral VTT, they are creating kind of intermediary responses to that. But the industry, the publishers, will have to move to better digital experiences to keep younger audiences engaged. And frankly, that's now bleeding over to older audiences as well, because as we become more engendered to the use of Twitch and Roll20 and these other online platforms, we will see that shift, and that shift must happen. It doesn't necessarily mean that books go away. It just means that books are a part of the experience, but the experience must be accommodated on where the audience is at. And audiences are using their phones, they're using their tablets, they're using computers. And what we have today with PDFs is just not the best experience
no, it's
on
not.
tablets and phones.
100% agree. Thank you for the host. Question came up here in the chat. How do you feel about the current state of IP going into public domain? I don't know if we need to elaborate on that.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of elaboration would be helpful. Is that in reference to older IP?
I don't know.
Yeah, maybe we can come back to that, because it looks like Boffred he actually just posted something too about apps, interactive character sheets and stuff. Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. So yeah, apps, interactive character sheets, like there's a utility aspect that people use their phones for characters. There's obviously a lot of kind of homegrown stuff where people make their own character creators, their own special character sheets, things like that. Utility is a big driver of that. If I were to forecast what will happen in the next, call it 5 years, the first company that is able to catch up to Dungeons and Dragons from a digital experience perspective, like D&D Beyond, will actually be able to give them a run for their money. There's the biggest reason I feel that D&D has such a large market share is not just because they have recognizable IP, but because when they were acquired by Hasbro has ages of marketing, demographic understanding, and research to inform how they run their business. The Wizards of the Coast company they're very small. They've got a big building, but they're very small from the sense of like number of employees. A lot of people who work for them are freelancers. But they have the marketing arm of Hasbro to help them understand how they reach audiences. And that's right now it's being done through influencers like Joe Manganiello, like dudes running games, and you have Critical Role, and these people these people who are influencers are making more money than people who actually made the game in the first place, which is awesome, because that means for you, Matt, and others who are in the chat and watching this video, they have the same opportunity if they can figure out a way to monetize it. But my point is that a company that can catch up with Wizards of the Coast to create digital enablement tools, to actually create playable experiences that are good online experiences. I'm sorry, Fantasy Grounds, it's not the best experience. A lot of people use it, but it's not a very intuitive interface. It's about UX design. It's about, experience design, how users interact with it. The company that catches up with them will give them a run for their money. And I think that we will see this industry continue to blossom and grow big. Because digital is, people say this all the time, but digital is where we have to go as an industry. It can't just be strictly books and cards and character sheets and form fillable PDFs. It has to evolve, and we have to meet audiences on the devices they're using and meet them where they're at online.
Let me say this as a consumer. One thing that really bugs me about the digital experience is having to buy the product multiple times. So just some feedback. If you're looking at moving that, because I'm looking at right now the Monsters Manual, the Dungeon Master's Guide, the Players Handbook here right beside me for D&D 5e. I've bought all 3 of them on Fantasy Grounds. I've bought all 3 of them on Roll20, and I refuse to buy or use D&D Beyond because I have to buy those 3 products yet again. So just some feedbacks, and I know everybody that I know feels the same way. So just if you guys are working on something like that, just keep that in mind.
If I were to look at it, I mean, this is probably totally off topic, but my prior experience would tell me that if a company could figure out a way to componentize their content, because this is really more so about user experience. If they can componentize their content and make that content consumable via API to custom create your own book, if you will, based on what's most important to you, because let's face it, the entirety of the revised core rulebook is not important to everybody. In fact, as a player, you probably only care about 30 pages out of 660, whatever it is, right? So the company, to be able to create a componentized approach for content, and to be able to feed that content across multiple platforms, digital, print, whatever, will change the game, so to speak. Now, I doubt that will happen in the tabletop role-playing game industry, because our industry is still, we're still catering to the old guard to some degree. And even though there's a lot of money in role-playing games, will anybody tell you any differently? There's a ton of money in role-playing games because a lot of people are making money making stuff, and it's not slowing down. Nonetheless, I don't feel that as an industry, the power players, say for maybe Wizards of the Coast, have the capacity or drive at this point, the right leaders in place to be able to make it a change that is so incredibly, it's so drastically, there's a paradigm shift. I don't think that the tabletop role-playing game industry will probably move in that sense to componentized design in any time in the near future. I'll be surprised if they did. And if they did, it would have to be a concerted effort between somebody like a publisher and, I don't know, a company like Drive-Thru RPG. But, who knows what will happen? I could be completely wrong. But my own experience, my own career experience in just looking at the role-playing game industry, I sincerely doubt that will happen in our lifetime.
Interesting. It's funny that the industry is 40 years old, if not more.
Yeah.
And it's going through a renaissance, but I think it's still in its infancy right now.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I just had this conversation the other day with a brick and mortar store, and we were talking about the way that books are placed on the shelf. And this is something that probably a lot of people who buy books don't maybe think about, but books are placed on shelves in 2 ways. They're either placed like this, right? Or they're placed like this. So when you look at a book on its spine, it must have something that attracts you to it, right?
Yes.
Some logo or icon, whatever it may be. Because when books are spine forward, they're not as prominent as books that are face forward. A lot of game store owners, and this is anecdotal, but I think this may be true. I'm going to talk to game store owners at Origins about this, but the D&D market is maturing past D&D. Fifth Ed's been out for what, 9 years? Almost 10 years now.
Yeah, it must be about that. Yeah, 8 to 9 years. Yeah, that sounds about right.
The market is maturing. And a lot of indie games are starting to, like, look at Modifius, look at Cubicle 7. Those companies went from small shops to owning big licenses.
Yeah, they're players in the game now. Yeah,
that's right. And their books are being put face forward, and D&D's put spine forward. Like this is an indie game, and this is D&D. And the read there, the insight rather, is that D&D as a market is maturing. That's why we're seeing a whole new growth in a category of what was traditionally called indie games. Indie games are on the rise. They're hot. And people who play D&D, they're getting tired of it. They're like, I want to try something new. And where are they looking? They're looking at indie games, because indie games have been doing it in the shadows of Dungeons and Dragons, and for years. And now we're kind of in our heyday period where, like, it's I wouldn't say the bubble's going to burst. I said that I believe we're going to continue to expand. So to Bofrin's point, like, microbrewed beers now are like
they're
selling. Yeah, they're selling like hotcakes. It's crazy.
Oh, it's insane.
Yeah, and companies like Bud Light and I don't know, whatever other brands are out there, Milwaukee's Best, like, are suffering because they don't have, because they're not handcrafting. There's a with indie games, there's a different sentiment toward them. So people who are maturing past D&D are like, oh my gosh, what about this? Oh my gosh, what about that? Oh my gosh, about this? And this game and that game and that game, and it's attracting them back to Kickstarter. And Kickstarter creators are creating things that are so unlike D&D now, that indie games are growing at a very exponential rate.
Mm-hmm.
So the industry is not showing signs of slowing down. If you look at the numbers through ICV2, which is the industry standard for hobby games in general, hobby games they're exploding. It's crazy. And there's a lot of reasons for that. There's no silver bullet, like you could say, oh, Critical Role, like, that's part of it. That's part of it. It's not the reason for it, but it's part of it. But online play, Twitch is like a massive driver of that.
Mm-hmm.
YouTube is a big driver of that. Be able to play online, people remotely is a big driver of that. But nonetheless, like, people are maturing past D&D and they're looking at indie games. And when I look at Zweihander, to look kind of inwardly, it's a really good time to be entering the market with this, because there's never been a better time, say for, as Boffer mentioned, the early 90s. Never a better time to enter the market now, because and it'll be interesting to see how Wizards of the Coast over time adapts to that change.
Yeah, and he's 100% correct, because I started playing back in the early to mid 90s with 2nd edition, and we just consumed it. And they're like, what else is there? And we got into Palladium games. We played West End games, Star Wars and Cyberpunk and all these other games. Like, oh, there's all these games available to us. And that kind of died down, but now we're back into it. And there's so much creativity and so many voices that are being heard because of Kickstarter, crowdfunding, just throwing it up on Drive-Thru RPG as a PDF or print on demand. These people have a voice, and people are discovering these great games. And that was part of the strategy behind when I created this channel also. Like, there's tons of D&D channels out there. We could search on Twitch right now for D&D. We get hundreds of channels. And I was like, I want people to see so many other great games that are out there. And we kicked off with Zweihander. That was the first game we played, and we continued down that path to try and shine a light on all these great games that are being produced that aren't getting that attention.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense, and I think it's gonna do well for Jasmine Zen over time too, to feature something that other people aren't talking about. It's a great time to be making RPGs.
Yes.
A lot of diverse voices, a lot of diverse people and experience and background and sexuality and ethnicity are being able to, we've got this really interesting time where we're hearing a lot of diverse voices, not just for virtue signaling, but like truly, like, we have the barrier is so low to entry now. The market is being flooded with stuff. Like, go back to the DMs Guild discussion. Like, there's so much stuff out there to sift through and figure out, like, is this good? Is this bad? I don't know. But more importantly, beyond all that, like, it's an opportunity for people who have traditionally been unable to approach the industry. They can do so now.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't imagine making Zweihander 10 years ago. No way. There's no way. The tools that enabled Zweihander to become successful were simply not there at the time.
Yeah, I agree. It is a changing industry, and it's exciting. It's exciting to be playing these games and be involved in it. Just be a part of it.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's jump back to the questions here. So that's an interesting one. Can we expect to see any corporate sponsored videos? Commercials. Well, you just had a commercial hit. We saw one for the Revised Edition. Rule walkthroughs, something we've talked about in the past. Adventures, and even campaigns. That and you've hinted at campaigns in the past as well.
Yeah. So the corporate sponsorship thing is a little bit more complicated, and I think it's important to to revisit that the relationship with Andrews McMeel is still in its infancy. And it's been I've been drinking from the fire hose for 34 days, in short. So there's a lot of things still to figure out, and we're still figuring it out. 2019 is the year that we're basically laying the groundwork. So committing to, we're gonna do playthrough videos and organized play and stuff like that is, I can't say for certain yet. I would like to. Let me say that much. I would love to. But it's going to be a matter of, does it make business sense? Does it fit within the current framework? If we do it, who does it? And at what scale? And what's the return? Is our goal awareness? Is our goal to monetize, conversion? There's all these kind of big questions around it that we need to figure out internally before I can commit to that. But I can tell you, as somebody who, I leave work and sit down every Wednesday and run Zweihander. We put our shitty videos up on YouTube, and people love to watch it. We're getting a lot of views. We're working with companies like Encounter Roleplay that do a much more polished production. Matt has done some, for the viewers, Matt's done some videos for us. I would love to do those sort of things and find a way to fund it and have it make sense. Our first kind of corporate, it's such a weird word to say because I don't view Andrews McMeel as it's a corporation. I don't view it as one. It feels so weird. But our first video we did was actually just released, I believe, a day and a half ago.
It was yesterday, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was yesterday. Yeah, a little 51-second trailer for Zweihander. That's going to go up on everywhere that Barnes Noble, Books a Million, Target, Amazon, all that stuff. That's our promo video, and I imagine we'll continue doing promo videos for all the books that we release. As for storylines, yes. One thing that when I look at the industry and I see that what some companies are doing well, some companies are doing poorly, is that if you look at D&D, they make an event around the storyline. They do one storyline a year, just one, and it's a big lead up. The most recent one, the Descent into Avernus, let's call, I believe. I watched some of the video around that when they ran it at the D&D thing, D&D Live, or what it was. It was a big event, and I think that there's something that we as the industry can take from that, which is, as opposed to this chunking out adventure after adventure after adventure, why can't we create broader storylines? Why can't we create something that is an event-like object it's a full-bore campaign, end-to-end, 150 to 300, 250-page book that could be played for the better part of a year? I think that's intriguing. Now, it's not to say that there isn't room for smaller adventures. I feel that those smaller adventures probably belong in something like, I don't know, Sellsword magazine, which we're looking at again.
Yes, please.
And stuff fit for the Groom Perilous Library, because people still want smaller adventures. But for storylines, or campaigns as they've been traditionally called, for storylines, there is absolutely room for it, and we have to have storylines. And in fact, you're probably going to hear a little bit more about what the first storyline will be toward the end of this year.
Cool.
Yeah. Our focus beyond just making Zweihander and Mongosh successful is getting the Players Handbook out the door.
Right.
Which I'd love to talk about now if we can.
Sure. Yeah, let's jump into the Players Handbook.
Yeah, so Players Handbook. We've had a lot of information online about this that prior to joining Andrews McMeel, I had envisioned take your revised core rulebook, literally split it in half, where, as some of you will discover, in the new version of Zweihander, there's this beautiful color plate that was drawn from Dan Mandish's original cover that splits the book right in half between the player side and the game master side.
It was done strategically. I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, right here. And I love this plate. It's so cool. I mean, it's so Warhammery. I mean, but it flips all the tropes on its ear. It's not like it's not the you don't have your dwarf like with this big warhammer and there's like an ogre pyromancer. And anyway, it's meant to be a very traditional image.
It's the background on our stream right now. That's what I've got on our overlay.
Yeah.
But my players always said, if we ever got in that situation, there's no way we would survive in Zweihander. It's like, yeah, you're probably right. You're dead. But
yeah,
it's a cool image. Yes. So that splits it between GM and players.
It's right down the middle. And the initial thought was, well, we split it down the middle. We do what's called the Player's Guide. And the Player's Guide at the time, prior to Andrews McMeel, was literally that, half book. That's it. Cut it in half, print it, ship it. Fuck it, it's done. And it would be a response to people wanting to have something that's a bit more portable. So as the conversation continued, as it ought to do, I'm a slave to quality. When I gave it more thought, I was like, well, wait a second. What if we did a new cover? Oh, and what if we call it the Player's Handbook? Because Player's Guide, if you look on Amazon, there's like 8,000 products called Player's Guide, but there's only 1,000 called Player's Handbook. Oh, and would that potentially bump it up in rankings alongside D&D? So
yes.
From a certain perspective. The next consideration not from a strategic perspective, but from a quality perspective, is to say, what if we did new artwork? And what if we did a new color plate? And what if we add both a new portrait and horizontal character sheet in the back? Oh, and this, and that, and this. And what if we move the remaining in the same profession stuff in the Game Mastery chapter into the player side? And what if we moved all the bestial ancestries, rewrote them, and put them in the front of the book, so now you have 10 ancestries to choose from? So it suddenly became like, yeah, there's something that's like, we got all this stuff that probably belongs in a player's handbook, and we got to make it. So my second week at the company, not knowing anything about the broader publishing world, because I'm gonna tell you, it's so different than I expected it to be, and I'm still learning. And there's so many amazing people, associates that work at ANU. I will continue to learn and understand and grow there for a long time, because I can assure you, even as an independent publisher, we don't know shit about the way the broader publishing world works. So my first thing I did in my first 2 weeks there, after kind of getting up to speed broadly over what's kind of happening in the company, is to try to get the Player's Handbook through the acquisitions process, to take it through the process from putting it in front of the people, to presenting it, to getting it okay, to pricing it out, to production, shipment, dropping in the warehouse, and sending it out. And it got approved. Ran it all the way through, and we're gonna drop it at PAX Unplugged in December. We're gonna have I believe the street date will probably be a week after PAX Unplugged. So you won't be able to pre-order it until then. We're doing that purposely because I want it to be truly unique to that show. But this actually touches back on what you asked before, Matt, about production schedules. I talked to you about Zweihander 12 months end to end, Mongosh and Zweihander Revised Core Rulebook 10 months of production from end to end. This is like 5 months. So Andrews McMeel brings that scale. They bring that knowledge. They bring that experience and those relationships and those channels and that quality to change the way we, from an independent creator to moving to an actual, I wouldn't call it real, but an actual, experienced publishing house. Like, we can work within those guidelines to bring books to publication much faster, and have the same level of quality, but to have the business structure, the business infrastructure, and all the relationships, and have people who, the company trusts implicitly to own that part of the process, from production to acquisition to layout to shipping, fulfillment, putting in stores, selling to Simon & Schuster, getting into your brick and mortar, the stuff that as an individual creator, is something that I found a lot of hacks to figure it out.
Right.
But there was no way I could ever do it on my own without bringing it somewhere, bringing it to a company, bringing it to a publisher. And that's how it all kind of changed. So yeah, Players Handbook. That's kind of the first kind of like product that we're running fresh through it. And like before, even though it started as something kind of like, just cut the book in half and we'll call it, it turned into something that is much higher in production quality with more content that's relevant to the players on a shorter timetable.
Right.
So
it's written, right? Essentially, you don't need. I know you're putting new art in there, but you don't have to. You could essentially put.
That's right. That's right. So the new artwork in the Player's Handbook, beyond having a new cover front and back, we're going to have all the full page images are being redone by Dan Mandich. Totally different images. We're redoing all the illustrations for the ancestries, and we're redoing all the illustrations for archetypes. Plus, we are taking some of the artwork from Mongosh and putting it into Zweihander because there are some 150 DPI images that I'm not satisfied with. I want better quality images in places. So Ken, who I spoke about before, Ken Duquette, is doing all that layout. And he's, like I said, he's a freelancer for AMU. He's a freelancer on his own, but he is still involved. We'll have that project wrapped up. My expectation is to have the layout done by the 10th and start to go through proofing. So I feel really good about that. I mean, that to me is what, I knew that it was a good decision to go to AMU, but after kind of going through that process, because I think that I think everybody, once they kind of heard the announcement, was like, oh shit, what's this actually mean? Like, are they going to censor stuff? Are they going to tell you can't do things? And I'm a pretty compelling storyteller. I'm long-winded, but nonetheless, like to get a book like that pushed through so quickly certainly speaks to the trust that AMU has put in me as an executive. It speaks to the brand promise that they make to all of their readers to put creators first. And as a creator, that made me feel really good because I knew that they trusted my judgment and they knew it would be a good fit, a good financial fit, especially for the company. So all in all, Players Handbook will be, I'm super stoked about it. I really struggled with in the beginning when we first got that copy from Lulu back in 2017. Like I was just like, oh my God, this book is too big. But then it was something like a joke. Like, Zweihander takes two hands, right? It's huge.
Is it going to be softcover? Like I have a copy of the Astonishing Swordsman Sorcerers. This is their Players Handbook. It's just released. So it's not going to be softcover like that. It's going to be another hardcover book. Wow.
Hardcover, soft touch, 70-pound paper, matte coating, Smythe binding, the ribbon, full on. That's our print standard. Everything we print will be collector's quality, and it will be done at a price point that people will be very pleased with.
That's awesome.
Very pleased with. And because that's the key. Once again, the expectation of the market is that they want high quality products. And it's not to diminish Astonishing Swordsman and everybody else who does soft cover, but the product line already has been all hardcover, save for the chapbooks and the folio. So why would we move? Why would we move to soft cover for our next thing? Because there's a reason why people do soft cover, and believe it or not, it's not for use at the table. It's cost.
Yeah.
It's cost perspective because soft cover is, or flexi cover is less expensive for companies that are not at scale. The scale at which AMU operates, I can't begin to underscore this even more. They print hundreds of thousands of books. They have relationships that extend back 2 to 3 decades with printers that they've worked with who they trust and produce really good work. They're printing at such a scale that it wouldn't make any sense for us to do soft cover at all. So I don't envision us doing our bigger 8.5 by 11 books in soft cover whatsoever. It wouldn't feel true to the line. It wouldn't feel true to what we've already established historically before coming on as an associate of the company. But most importantly, I already set the standard with the first Kickstarter that the book's going to be high quality. So every book we do thereafter needs to be of a similar quality or better. You know, I'd love to put foil on a book. Wouldn't that be awesome? Like, have a foil logo on every, like, the Zweihander logo turns into foil. I don't know. I mean, these are the things that I can, you know, potentially explore now because AMU has those relationships.
Huh. Well,
to Skartagar, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name here, your handle rather. But the Players Handbook will be the same size as the D&D Players Handbook. The difference is that the pages won't be glossy, the cover won't be glossy, and it will have a ribbon.
There we go.
Yeah. I think it's going to come in at like 270 pages. I think the Players Handbook's 260 on the nose. So 270 is where I'd like to see it. I think we can do it, what I'm looking at now. Because we're condensing the table of contents. We're condensing the appendix. Condensing the index. The appendix exists from the sense of you have horizontal character sheet, portrait character sheet, and the actions in combat. But on the character sheets, like that's one thing I'll probably show a little bit more on later. I think I know that Adam and Mike had showed some of the patrons a view of it. They're super cool because they were set up like Mad Libs. So like when it came, yeah, so it's great. So I think I have one here in front of me. So those of you who have seen the previous character sheets know that information's kind of spread all over, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, but I think everybody will appreciate this. So I don't know if you all can see this clearly on the sheet in the camera, but this is the new portrait, and what I want to really draw attention to is the topmost part. Mm-hmm. So one thing, this is just an observation, when people talk about their characters around the table, they're sometimes kind of unsure how to talk about them. Like, you may say, like in D&D, you may say, I'm a 4th level Eladrin fighter with blah, blah, blah power, right? On a neutral label. Some games are a little more complex, a little more difficult to talk about what your character is and who they are. So I sat down and I was like, I think Mad Libs is brilliant in the sense that the way that it's played. And I was like, how can you apply a Mad Libs-like approach to telling a story about your character? Like if somebody says, Dan, tell me about the character you play. And here's what I would say. Danziger Eckhart's an adult human male, assassin, bailiff, and convict. He's 5'9", 155 pounds of a husky build. Danziger has brown skin, black hair, and brown eyes. He also has these distinguishing marks. He has a slashed eye, marked skin, and a cataract. He was born in winter as of the aristocratic social class and of the scholastic upbringing. Danziger's dooming is, I'll die alone. His drawback is marked for death. Like that literally is a sentence that you create at the top of your character sheet that you can rattle off to anyone and communicate immediately who they are. And that's how the character sheet was redesigned. And this is the portrait one, the front sheet at least.
Ooh,
and it follows it follows the same approach. And these are all redesigned, by the way, by Kenneth Duquette. Hey, Ken, what's up, buddy? I'm sure right now he's actually in Zweihander, in Players Handbook land. He's working on layout for that. We're trying to hit a deadline here pretty quick. But, yeah, he redesigned all these from the ground up. There's more affordance and white space throughout it. Complete layout difference. Yeah, there's the old one.
Yeah, there's the old one. For people who aren't familiar with it.
Yeah, we use sepia tone in it, too. We use 2-color because we need to delineate some things differently. But, yeah, the Mad Libs thing, like, at the top, like to be able to read sentences and define who your character is, seemed like an important kind of improvement. It seemed like from a UX perspective, especially, like I was like, I'm pretty proud of that. And it took us a bit to figure it out, but yeah, it'll be a way for you to kind of talk about your character in a way that makes sense, as opposed to having to hut and peck across your character sheet and say, I've got this and I got that, and this is kind of who he is, and blah, blah, blah. And it's a uniform way for everybody around the table to explain who their character is. And I think it's so incredibly important. Is oftentimes, I mean, a lot of people are, it's like I said, you talk about D&D, it's done in simpler terms, and some other games too. But Zweihander being a game of, to be completely fair, it's medium crunch. Finding the right information to communicate when somebody asks you about your character is tough. So this was a difficult solve, but an improvement, because I knew that there has to be reasons to buy the Player's Handbook. If you're in the core rule book, like, why would you buy the Player's Handbook? And I think there's still some questions around that. But better artwork, improved layout, new character sheets, having some of the GM section optional rules moved into the front, having all the ancestries put up there, having the mutant races put up there, the orcs, the Grendel, the Skurzak, and the Aslan, having all that kind of in one place felt right. And plus, a lot of people have been asking, like, why can't I get a smaller book? The feedback we always get, and I'm sure you all know this already, Zweihander's too big. It is. It is. It's a big book. Yeah. It's intimidating.
But it has everything you need in one place.
It does. And that was my argument for a long time. It's like, it has everything. It's a point. Like the real numbers. I think I actually broke this down on Twitter one day, talking about the size, the scope, and the number of pages between D&D and Zweihander. So D&D has 995 pages between the DMG, the Player's Handbook, and the Monster Manual. Mm-hmm. The actual weight is over 9 pounds between the 3 books. The price point's $99 retail. $99.95 is the retail for all 3 books put together. So it's 995 pages. Compare that to Zweihander. 668 pages, more options, more monsters, less expensive price point at $65, and only weighs 5.5 pounds. I mean, it's funny in the sense that, like, math is great, it's awesome, but still we have our human brain says, God damn, that's a big book. I don't want to play this. So if we, and it's not to say we made a mistake by producing one large book. In fact, I'd say it was a strength. But we have to adapt. In the way we adapt to the broader market is to produce something that's smaller and more compact that people can carry around in their backpack, but also won't be intimidating if somebody says, we're going to play a game of Zweihander. Here's the fucking Bible. And like, oh my God, like, I have to read the New Testament and the Old Testament? No.
It's funny because I brought this to work this week to share with one of my coworkers who's also a player in the game, and my coworker's like, "Holy shit! Did you read that whole thing? How do you run that? Right. What do you mean? That's a game?" And it's like, yeah, well, you don't have to. I don't read all the monsters and everything. I don't read all of it.
That's right. And as players, I mean, the honest truth is, as Zweihander it is not a complex game by any means. The things you need to know, it's very simple. How do I roll dice, and what does my character do? That's it. And it's 32 pages. It's all you need to know if you want to play a game as Zweihander. It's 32 pages. Mm-hmm. Everything else, like, it kind of layers on top of that. Granted, there are certain improvements we made from the way that things are communicated in the book. I certainly agree with that. But the game is not terribly complex. But there is our lizard brain, right? Says that, like, oh, that is way too big. I don't want to mess with that. Like, this seems complex. But the reality is that there's 7 pages of how to play. Mm-hmm. There's, like, I think 13 pages of combat, and you only need to know your ancestral trait and your professional traits. So once you get that figured out, like, everything else can be driven by the DM, or GM rather. So the Player's Handbook it speaks to a need, I feel, that people want met, which is something smaller, more compact, less expensive.
Yes.
$65 it's a big ask, but if you look at books of similar size that are selling very well, it is not that different. A lot of books are retailing for $50. Mm-hmm. And once you convince people, like, it's everything in one, like, it's easier to justify the cost, but still we have that kind of cognitive dissonance about, like, well, I don't want to buy the entire book. What do I really need out of it? And that's what the Player's Handbook in summary will solve for, is, like, this is all you need as a player. It'll give you everything you ever could possibly need for the core experience. It does not include anything from Mongosh. That is by design. Mongosh is it's a supplement. Yeah. Exactly. You don't need it to play. And I'm sure everybody knows that parts of Mongosh were originally planned for Zweihander, but our original script was 970 pages. Yeah, in Google Drive, and we cut so much content, and a lot of content actually never made it into Mongoose either, because it was not suitable for gameplay. It's just stuff we used around my game table that's readily. But we when we talk about Zweihander and Mongoose, and really games powered by Zweihander, because I think somebody mentioned earlier about like D100 systems versus D20.
Yes, that was asked earlier.
Yeah. So math is math. At the end of the day, math is math. Probability is probability. It doesn't matter if you're rolling 2d10 or flipping coins. Probability is probability. I think that D100s, there's two different camps of people, right? It's like, I want to either understand my numbers end to end, or calculating percentages are too difficult for me, whatever it may be. So one thing I really want to do in Zweihander, I think there's people who understand RPGs in a way that not just from a player perspective, but also from a research perspective, can see this, that there's an elegance baked into the system. If you peel away all the heavy fluff and you peel away all the detritus that's not necessary to the core experience, there's an elegance baked into Zweihander and baked into Mongoose, and that elegance will continue to be refined in future books like Colonial Gothic and Tetsu Bow and others that I've yet to announce. But we'll continue to improve those things, and you'll see that elegance baked in there. So that's one thing I really think that people can pick up on from the perspective of like playability, is that it's not a terribly complex game, because when you move from Zweihander to Mongoose, there's not like a large leap in logic to understand how Mongoose works. I think Adam Coble, when he did his review of Mongoose, he was talking about, you have forever to make your first RPG. There's no expectation for you to make your first RPG. You have all the time in the world. I mean, I didn't publish Zweihander until I was 39. I'm 42 now. Until I wrote my first book. But your follow-up to that, you have a very small window. And within that window, right, some games go up. Like they say, no, we're going to epic levels, and here's some god tier shit, and they turn out to be inelegant approaches. Mongoose is not like that. Mongoose expands the base, it expands the foundation, and the way I kind of see supplements, well thought out supplements, looking back at poorly thought out ones like the Fighter's Kit, a little weird shit out of D&D second edition that came out, and even some supplements out there today. I don't want to name names, but we know what they are. If you buy RPGs and understand, some supplements are great, some are bad. But my point is that Mongoose was meant to expand the base, and anything that we build within the powered by Zweihander D100 game engine will be built the same way. It will expand the base. It will never, like, we're gonna do epic tier and then super epic tier, and then like, here's this whole new rule set for you to figure out. Like in Mongoose, there's a vehicle combat system.
Yes.
And the vehicle combat system was built to be used in the existing combat system, using the same action point economy, using the same things. You just get some new options if you happen to be a driver of a vehicle. So we didn't want to create subsystems within subsystems. Instead,
Smart.
the systems, they nest, they all interlink.
Simple.
That's right. And the stuff that's in the back of the Game Master's Guide, like, you don't have to use social entry. You don't have to use chase scenes. You don't have to use wilderness travel. You don't even have to use the stuff in Liber Obscurus, which is the building intrigue and the intrigue rules in the back of Mongoose. Those are optional systems for a game master to make the decision to use those. They're not necessary for the core Zweihander experience, but combat's required. Most RPGs are about combat, and when we designed vehicle combat, it had to fit within that. So that speaks to some of our design principles, is like, let us not continue building systems that are bolted on and don't fit within the milieu of the game design. Let us build things that interlink, and they must interlink strongly, because, like we all know, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So vehicle combat in standard combat had to fit together perfectly. And we play tested the ever-living hell out of vehicle combat. We did, it's so funny looking back, we did these crazy vehicle, like monster truck, like things, where we basically had vehicles versus vehicles. And we did vehicles with people fighting people on foot. Then we did people in a vehicle fighting people on foot. Then we're like, let's do vehicle with people and vehicle with people and do like a big crash and derby. Like, how does this work around
like
the table?
Mad Max style.
Yeah. And you can see it too, because at first it was like we got too detailed, too literal with the vehicle combat stuff. And we're like, okay, strip it down to its barest essentials, and how can we make this abstract yet still work on a grid? Even though a grid is not implied in the book, all combat, all vehicle combat and standard combat works on a grid perfectly. So we stripped away all of the unnecessary complexity. We distilled it down to its purest essential things. And we said, okay, will this work in a broader context? Does this fit the elegance of the rules? And I think the answer is yes. I haven't really heard a lot about people running vehicle combat yet in Mongosh, only because I don't think a lot of people have the book yet. We still have it in early access on Drive Through RPG right now. It's not even, you can't even get the fully illustrated PDF anymore. So I'll be interested to see how these things work out over time, how people change vehicle combat. So JNove36, we're actually moving to a grid in my home game on Wednesdays. We're going to start filming with a grid. Yeah. I just, our lead playtester, Mike, when he started gaming with us about 9 years ago, we were using a grid and dioramas and all kinds of crazy stuff. And when we started recording, or I should say before we started recording, like a year before that, we had a player who was playing remote out of Chicago, and we couldn't use a grid anymore. We couldn't use figures. So now that everyone's actually local here, we don't have somebody dialing in remote, because we had a laptop at the end of our table. With his own monitor and his own sound system, and treated him like he was there. He played with like 5 people who were actually in person, including myself. But now that everybody's here, back in Kansas City, everybody's moved back. Our buddy, he's a VP of Bank of America. He was working in Chicago, but total aside, he's now here. So we're like, let's use a grid again. So I've been looking at these things. I just backed it. I think it's called Monster Adventure Grid. Essentially they solved my biggest quibble with Dwarven Forge, which was interlockability. Give me Lego-like terrain.
I've seen that.
Yeah. So
cool.
I backed the Dungeon Master set, and it was incredibly expensive, but I was like, I believe so strongly in this product, I'm gonna go all in, because this was the jump start that I needed to really get back to figurines and stuff. And we're going to do it in our home game. We're going to see how it works. It'll be an interesting experiment. It's been so long, but I mean, once again, when we were playtesting Zweihander, for years leading up to this, and Mongosh Vehicle Combat, we were playing on the grid. So although we have learned, we prefer Theater of the Mind, I think the grid will be an interesting way to start playing differently for our home game. I know the gang, that the playtesters are really excited about it, and I am too. But to the rules elegance thing, I mean, it works on the grid, it works on the Theater of the Mind. It works even with range bands if you use the Warhammer 3rd Edition terminology. Like, it still works within that. And we've used it in very, very different ways. So like Sasha mentioned, like the far away, near, far away, flying, hidden stuff is really, really smart. I like the abstractness. There's range bands. Yeah, range bands are super cool.
I do like range bands also.
Yeah, there's just so, I don't know. If I had my druthers, and if I had listened to myself in the beginning, because I had this internal tension, this struggle when I first wrote Zweihander, there were things about 3rd edition Warhammer and other RPGs that I loved, like the Star Wars D20 system. I was like, oh man, rage bands are so cool, but people want like incremental, movement, incremental ranges, and and I went with incremental ranges as
Yeah.
opposed to saying like use range bands. But on the same token, like what I didn't want to do is like pepper the book with like, here's an option. Oh, and here's an option. Oh no, here's an option. Because I personally feel this is not a reflection of the company by any means, but my personal quibble with RPGs is like filling it with options. Like if it's a fucking option, just make it part of the game. Like it's, and I think this is my type A personality. Like I have a rigidity to the acceptance of a way a game is played, and it feels like options that are bolted on are oftentimes things that fell through the cracks or didn't fit the quote golden rule, which is like, oh, the golden rule bugs me so much. And there's a golden rule in Zweihander, and it's very different than what you'll see in every other game, because the golden rule in other RPGs is like, just ignore it. It's a designer cop-out. The way I wrote it is like, don't ignore it. Work with everybody around the table to change it together and make it a house rule.
And
so,
smart way to do it.
Yeah.
Everybody has a part of the decision then.
That's right. It's not just the game master's game. I mean, it's everybody's game. We're all telling a really cool story. One person just happens to be rolling most of the dice.
Yeah. Kind of at the helm. I think going back to range bands, I think range bands are coming into style. I see it in more and more games, and more people like it. They feel it's more elegant than I can move 6 squares. But that's just my observation, and I do like them. I like range bands more. There was a question in the chat here, and I answered yes. But do you feel like Zweihander lends to RP more than D20 D&D system?
Yeah.
I was just like, yes.
So it's funny. I've told this story I think 1,000 times. My friends they're probably fucking sick of it. But I love D&D. I have played D&D my entire life. That's my first RPG I ever played at 12. My first book I had was at 10 when I didn't know what D&D was. It was that first monster. I actually still have it on my shelf, the monster manual from first edition, and we used to pretend in the sandbox we were fighting monsters. When I turned 12, I figured out, oh wait, this is actually a game. So I've been playing D&D for years, and love D&D. I haven't played a lot of 5th edition, but I played a lot of 4th, which is interesting in its own ways. But and the anecdote I always tell is like D&D in most dungeon-based games, the thing I dislike about them is that they are basically playing Diablo at the table. I have no interest in that whatsoever. I have no interest in beer and pretzel games as a game master. As a player, a little bit different, but as a game master, I don't. Like, I have different need states as a player and a game master. I've certainly played in some mature games as a player, but my chances to play are so incredibly rare. I always game master. But my point is that the anecdote I always make is that in D&D, you stick your sword in and you pull it down and you slice the lottery orc open, and out comes type A and type B treasure, and maybe you'll get the plate mail with your illness. But like, I feel that D&D in general, although you can make it something that it is not a game that is not, it is a game that is, although it embraces the idea of the 3 pillars, right? It embraces those 2 other pillars very loosely, right? Intrigue and travel. Combat it does very, very well. It's intended to do so. And it is a combat-based game. It is a game where you literally kill stuff to grow in power. And I hate that. I don't like it. I strongly dislike it. And it's not something I do as a player. The games that I write, the stories that I tell at my table. If anyone is watching our Patreon and have seen the way that we've run games, like our first story, the Denahalo Mystery, was 20 episodes. We had 2 combats. Like, the rest of it's just intrigue and mystery. In Queen of Embers, we just recorded episodes 35 and 36 last night. And we're only in chapter 3 of 7. And we've had 2 combats, and that we started that game in, I don't know, like 5 months ago. So Zweihander has been, for us around my game table, it has always been an instrument for roleplay, or in this case, a way that I have been able to take the things that I had kind of mashed together between D&D and Warhammer and Star Wars and Pathfinder and all these other games, and like said, here's how I can kind of realize that in a way that, even though there's combat in it, it's not the crux of the game. In fact, the game is dangerous, but it is dangerous in the sense that you're more likely to suffer lasting injuries than to die.
Right.
But there's so much story chunked into the game. The expectation in Zweihander is I don't think it is. I'm biased, obviously, and you guys tell me. Like, I don't think the expectation of Zweihander is that it's going to be a combat game every single game, because there's no way the game will be sustainable.
No.
In that sense.
When I got ready to run it the first time, I told my guys there's going to be no dungeon crawls, because we came from playing D&D, we played dungeon crawls, and I was like, we will never do a dungeon crawl in Zweihander, because you'll die by like the second room. It's going to be over. It'll be a bloodbath. So this is not that kind of game. So I used that to try and set that expectation. And after that, they were terrified of combat. They did everything they could not to get into combat. And it became an RP heavy game because of that. I think character creation lends itself to making it more of an RP heavy game as well, because you end up with such a unique character if you use the Grim Perilous method, which typically gets you out of your comfort zone, and then you have a lot of fun RPing rather than getting into combat, right? You want to play this weird thing that you've created. That's been my experience with the two groups I've run through the game so far. Yeah,
and if you look at, and you've ran this twice now, A Bitter Harvest. A Bitter Harvest literally assumes that combat is optional, and even though it says that there are situations where combat can interrupt, but the way that I rewrote A Bitter Harvest was to ensure that it was not a simple, like, let's kill some kobolds, let's kill some orcs and solve a mystery. Instead, it's about, like, let's get players on the railroad, then basically unfetter them and let them run wild and forward and figure things out on their own. To drive them in a traditional sense, like to the story, but then to say, okay, shackles off, figure it out. And players can explore a lot of different avenues to figure out those things, right? So, my home games, like I mentioned, like combat happens rarely. And our characters in Queen of Embers right now are just entered intermediate tier. I think that they're about 6 purchases in at this point. And they have, we've had like 2 instances of combat. A lot of it's been solved through social intrigue, use of skills. In Zweihander, because it's a skill-based system, it does not lean on rolling a d20 to hit and do damage. In fact, if you look in combat, there's so many different options that are non-damage dealing. This is done by design, because not every character is built for combat, and the expectation is that players should use combat as a last resort, because injury is a very likely outcome. And combat tends to be like a pendulum. No matter what tier you're at basic, intermediate, or advanced, the bounded accuracy model in there, to go back to the rules elegance, is baked to ensure that there's not wild swings in power no matter where you're at. So somebody mentioned earlier about putting a basilisk in front of their first combats. It's funny you mentioned that, because we had a set of basic tier characters just absolutely slaughter an advanced tier singular foe, because numbers always win in this game. Numbers, not in the sense of like how many bonuses do I get, but volume of people. Like, you can take a band of peasants and they'll tear a well-tuned knight off their horse and beat them to death with mere pitchforks. That is intentional. Numbers are meant to be intentional in that sense. So I think it usually takes a couple combats for players to figure out, like, oh shit, like combat's probably not the best option here. And I think that when you approach Zweihander from that perspective, like it's incredibly refreshing. Because the only games that I feel that do not combat well are story games. World of Darkness is an example that was just brought up, but a traditional story-ish game. But story games do that really well. Like the tension is not about combat; it's about intrigue and politics and the human condition and relationships. And this, in the case of Zweihander, it's about, in a more philosophical sense, it's not about characters who will change the world. No, but the world that'll change the characters.
That's a good way to sum it up. Because you start as a nothing, also. That's right. So you want to avoid combat because you are literally nothing. A rat catcher, a prostitute, whatever. Right? You're not built for combat. You're not a superhero out of the gates like so many other games.
Right. and even as you achieve those new professions at advanced tier, intermediate tier, like you're an assassin in advanced tier, it's awesome, great, but it is not comparable to the D&D experience whatsoever. Because in Zweihander, it's not about like getting more mathematical bonuses. It's about gaining more options to solve problems. And those options to solve problems are not always necessarily geared around combat. In fact, if you look at the professional trades, which every profession gets a unique one, not many of them are actually geared toward the use of combat skills whatsoever.
No.
It's around the other 35 skills that I feel are more important to the game in many cases. But there's always an expectation for combat in RPGs, and combat is still featured in Zweihander, obviously. But it is not the key feature of the game by any means.
Question in the chat that came up: how did you come up with the fail forward idea? They love it, and they've stolen it and used it in other games.
Yeah, good question. So this is a D&D quibble. Okay, so the group. Okay, so there's this trope, and you've heard this before. Like, I'm the fighter, and I'm in plate mail, and if I can't sneak, because I know in my head I'm going to fail. So the fighter never sneaks; the sneaky thief does. So I thought about this from the perspective of like, well, how can I break down that? How can I break that down? How can I make it to where the person in armor, the fighter, will be willing to sneak forward? And the way I thought about it was that, it's like every failed climb wall check in D&D shouldn't result in falling. Like, it's so silly to me. It's only when there's a determined amount of risk that it should result in failure or abject failure in the case of a critical failure. So I was like, what's the middle ground? What's the middle ground to say, how can these people be sneaking and still failing their tests, but how can I still ratchet up the tension? And the answer was fail forward. So if you look in a Better Harvest, there's a scene where there's a series of rolls to sneak up on the edge of a cliff to overlook the camp where Mother Johanna and the others are at.
Yeah.
And it says it's fail forward test. Like, failing your stealth test doesn't necessarily mean you're revealed. It means that you begin to suffer stress and mental peril because the tension is getting higher. The stakes are getting higher, and you're feeling it in your stomach. You're feeling the knots in your stomach build. You're feeling your heart race. That you're feeling nervous and tension and anxiety. Only when you critically fail in those cases do you actually flub it. So I do this all the time in my games. Like, someone's climbing a wall. Like, I'm not going to say, like, if you fail it, you fall off the wall. Instead, it's like, it's a fail forward test. If you fail this test while climbing the wall, you suffer physical peril because it's strenuous.
Yeah.
If you critically fail, you'll fall. But a failure will not result in simply falling off the damn wall. And that's why I felt fail forward was an interesting and intriguing approach, and it really resonated well with the players on the table, because it was something that the playtesters were so unaccustomed to, because we've been playing together for so long. It felt like a really interesting way to basically create it's not risk-free, but a way to basically rob people of peril, and to make them to use the kind of like, because most games are like fail, success, or in Zweihander it's fail, success, fail critically, and succeed admirably, and sometimes succeed with a caveat that you suffer peril or something else. So that's the fail forward. And in fact, I have to pay tribute to Warhammer 3rd Edition on this, because they have that when you roll the dice and you read the runes, like, they have that success but thing, or that failure and thing. And it's an intriguing concept, and how to conjugate that to a D100 system was a challenge, but I think the fail forward stuff works, and in fact, I've seen it in other games now too.
Yeah, I was gonna say the Star Wars Fantasy Flight game uses that, but Warhammer is the precursor to Star Wars, so that means they've just kind of put it in their other games now. So, and I love it. I think as a GM also, it tests your chops, because you have to come up with things on the spot. You're like, okay, you didn't really fail, so what does this look like? I don't want to just give you like physical damage, because that's lame. Let's come up with something like unique and narrative related to what you're trying to do without failing, but just something going wrong. It's a cool system. I love it. Yeah.
I'm glad. Yeah, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback on it, and I think it's a rule that can be carried into other games too very easily, because it solves for that I just, I want people to take chances they normally wouldn't do. I don't want to like force them to make chances they feel their character wouldn't, but I like for them to explore the idea of like, well, yeah, I may not be the strongest, most athletic person or most coordinated person, but yeah, I may try to bounce across that tree, or yeah, I'm going to try to like, arm wrestle that ogre. I don't know. Like, I want people to take those chances, and I think
Yes.
the fail forward test is a good way to do that. And because it has a tension mechanic,
Yeah.
that they're accumulating peril, and their skill chances are getting worse and worse over time. And because the peril only affects skills which you have a skill rank in, it still means that you can still be useful even if you're suffering from peril in skills that you don't have any ranks in. So yeah, it seemed like a really great pairing with the peril threshold thing, which was I'm it's probably the mechanic I'm the proudest of in Zweihander is the peril mechanic. It's by far the way that I've been able to solve for some of the challenges around, like in D&D, if you fail from fear, you run away. Well, that sucks, because what happens every time? I'm going to run away far enough where I can't see them, turn around and go back and save my friends. Instead, it's like, instead of forcing somebody to do something, to react a certain way, to tell them how your character acts this way because this happens. Instead, it's about like, okay, so now your skills aren't nearly as good. So you as a player now make a decision for your character. Like, what would your character be doing if they were suffering from peril in this instance? Not just running away because the spell effect says so, or the effect says so for the monster, but instead saying like, you're getting in worse and worse condition. It's not necessarily about taking damage. It's about getting stressed out and fatigued out, but doing it in a way that's elegant and not an ugly way of managing a bunch of pluses and minuses like a lot of other games do.
Right. Yeah, no, it's elegant in its design. Okay. This isn't one of my questions, and I know we've gotten away from the questions, but I kind of want to ask about it because you went into a lot of detail in the Player's Handbook, and you've hinted at this also in Discord and social media, but specifically in Discord. I don't know how much you can reveal about starter set.
Yeah,
you've put some hints out there to the community that you're like, hey, if we were to make a starter set, what A, B, and C? Like, what would you like? What would you like to see in it? What should we do? Is that in the plans? Can you talk about it? Is it a pipe dream? Is it?
I got big dreams. No, I just blew up. So I want to, before I answer that question, I want to talk about what Dungeons and Dragons is doing right, because this is a lesson that I think all companies can learn. I know I bag on D&D a lot for its mechanics, but the way they've kind of structured their business, the way they approach it now is unparalleled. And they've basically created this really interesting economy not economy from a monetary perspective, but an economy in how to attract audiences to play D&D. And it's this kind of ecosystem that feeds upon itself. So you have your traditional triptych, which is your Player's Handbook, your Monster Manual, and your Dungeon Master's Guide, right? Yep. The path in traditionally was to buy a Player's Handbook if you're a player, or buy all 3 books if you're a DM, right?
Yes.
So that's the traditional path in. The way they kind of changed it this time around with 5th editions, they said, okay, let's create a set of basic rules that are free, that you can download and use to build characters and play. Smart.
Yes.
They extended that by making starter sets, which starter sets used to be kind of the hotness for them back in basic D&D, as a way to introduce players to the system. But what they figured out is they created this ecosystem, and I think this is so brilliant that they say, okay, a player who's exploring Dungeons and Dragons, like, they don't want to go in and buy $99 worth of books.
No.
But they want to understand how this game works. They go to Target, they pick up a $20 box set, bring it to their friend's house one night and say, boom, let's play some D&D, let's try it out. In fact, when I bought the D&D starter set recently, it was like $12 on Amazon.
Yeah.
So that is the gateway drug.
It's
right.
good. It's well made.
It is. It's fantastic. That Lost Finds of Fandelver.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I bag on D&D a lot, but that thing is amazing.
Yes.
It's smart. So what happens then is that, oh, I really want to get the Player's Handbook and make my own characters.
It's the
But
gateway drug.
it's $50. Like, I don't want to I don't go to the retail store and buy a full book so they can be like, okay, oh, they got free basic rules to make characters up to level 5. Cool, let's do that. So you grab that PDF for free and you build a character and you play for a little bit. Building on Lost Minds of Phandelver, growing your characters. Like, okay, I'm all in. I need to get a Player's Handbook. You're going to get a Game Master, a D&D's guide. You're going to get a Monster Manual. I'm going to run some games. So they developed this ecosystem for people entering the hobby and buying into the broader set of books, the real money makers for them. Because, as an example, Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master Guide, and Monster Manual are created with the intent purpose to make money. I guarantee that their margins on the box set is incredibly slim, because their goal is not to make money on that. Their goal is awareness, because not everything you produce is meant to generate revenue. Loss leaders is an example. Like, adventures are oftentimes loss leaders for RPG companies, but that's their pathway in. They want to build awareness, and by having a starter set to free basic stuff in PDF, and then buying the full suit of backs, like, it's a beautiful ecosystem. So
there's even dice. You don't need anything else. Here's right. Everything you need to play our game. Have fun.
That's right. So I asked myself, in this world of like, what could Zweihander be in the broader market? I asked myself the same questions. Like, what is it that D&D got right in this? And that's the kind of the ecosystem I kind of like charted out. I was like, that's the insight. The insight is that we need to draw people in. We know the book's too big, so we need to create a Player's Handbook. We know that people want an online version to play, so we're going to create a condensed version of an SRD. We know we want to attract people in target to Zweihander, so maybe a box set's the answer. And so what I did is I went out and I bought 7 box sets. I bought a box set for practically every RPG that currently has a box set out in the past 4 years, including Warhammers. And I was like, what's the best? What's the worst? What would I keep? What would I punt? What would I add? And I get this loose project that I've kind of created. I haven't even proposed it anywhere at this point. It's all very much like it's a pipe dream that could be a reality, but I like the idea of perhaps exploring a starter set over time. Cool. I think that would be neat to do, in particular, if we were to kind of step back and talk about PAX Unplugged, where younger gamers are going. Like, how could I build awareness among younger gamers without having to say, buy this $55 book? It would be, buy this box set for $19.90, whatever it may be. Yep. Take it home. Tell me what you think. So it's an easier sell for people with less money. And even though the RPG industry is generating a lot of revenue, most of that revenue is not being generated by younger generations. It's not being generated by millennials or Gen Y or Gen Z. It's mostly older gamers who are generating that revenue. So we have to. We spoke about before about meeting audiences where they're at and meeting them in the medium which they are accustomed to. And a box set is a medium that you could sell into somebody who's younger, or anyone who doesn't have a lot of money in general. I mean, because let's face it, the American dollar, I mean, maybe you don't face this in Canada, but the American dollar doesn't spend for shit. It's so very different in America now the past couple decades. Totally different story. But my point is that we can accommodate those things in the way that we create this economy of how we introduce people into Zweihander in this world of games, and to follow, this really insightful model D&D has basically created, and to use that to draw interest into the bigger purchases, like the $65 full-on book, the $49 Player's Handbook, the $55 Grim Imperialist supplement, the cards, the whatever else it may be. I think it's a model that I would love to follow, and I'm really in the discovery phase right now to determine, is this worthwhile pursuing? I think it is. Yeah. But once again, from a business perspective, does it make sense for the business? And the answer is unknown as of yet.
So not for now. Maybe for Zweihander 2.
I promise, no second edition in
I was kidding.
at least 5 years, at least minimum. I don't, because it doesn't need a second edition. What it will do over time, and you all will see this. Every new game that is powered by Zweihander will be an improvement upon the previous one, and they will all be compatible in a certain sense. And when I say compatible, I don't necessarily mean if you look at Dark Heresy, Rogue Trader, Warhammer 40K, back in the Fantasy Flight days, like how they used the D100 system and they didn't fit together. You couldn't play them together without really kind of mangling them together. Like the Powered by Zweihander system, its precept is to say all of these games will interlock together. You want to carry a character over from Colonial Gothic into Zweihander, it is not a heavy lift. There will not be hardly any translation or conversion necessary because it all follows a similar setup. In fact, you will probably find when you crack open Colonial Gothic that it's laid out in a similar fashion, that mechanics are expressed in a similar way, that the framework as it's presented will be similar as well, because we're creating platforms at this point that will have their own unique kind of twists for that game, or within that, whatever within the DNA of Colonial Gothic, that will turn into some new mechanic or something different about Zweihander. But any game powered by Zweihander will have these kind of minor improvements and tinkering over time that will be changed because we must apply lessons learned. There are things in Zweihander I don't like now. Those will be changed in future editions, but it won't change inherently the way the game engine works. The game engine it's good. It's got a good foundation. It's got a good chassis. But we can put a Mustang body on it, or we can put a Kia Stinger or a Ferrari. Like, we can do all kinds of different things on the exterior, but once you peel back the layers, it's still a car. It still has wheels. It still has an engine. It still goes forward and backward. It still runs on gas or electric, whatever it may be. That's how Powered by Zweihander games will work. It's the same way that the Fate games operate. They all kind of change slightly depending on the genre.
Fate, or I was going to say even Modiphius with their 2D20. It's the same kind of idea, right? You've got Star Trek and what Conan next to me, John Carter Mars. It's the same engine, but they build on it and they change it with each game that comes out and improve it. Yeah, without a doubt. Question chat there. I think we kind of touched on this already, but do you think you have intentional content to appeal to minorities like women, people of color, non-binary gender types? It's a big part of the growing community anymore.
That's an interesting insight. And I can answer that. It's not a yes/no thing. So I think I spoke earlier before about the choices we made up front, which is to not portray, if you look at, I always go back to Warhammer because it's kind of the wellspring we drew from. It was the touchstone during creation, and granted, it shares similar DNA. But to talk about Warhammer historically, like, it's a very hyper masculine game. And it's not something, and it's something in the artwork that just never really appealed to me. So when we thought about like how we do the artwork, we're like, why don't we just do the people who are playing the games, as opposed to saying, oh, it's these in-story characters are all fucking Caucasian, and because like, I'm sorry, that's just not the power fantasy for an African American person is have to come to the table and play. I'm gonna play some hyper masculine white dude. That's not the common experience. I know that for a fact. It's like, I look on our own game table. So firstly, I will tell you our demographics at our game table. I'm quarter Meskwaki. My father grew up on a reservation in Illinois. He's half Native American. My buddy Tim Coron, the guy who is the Bank of America VP, is half Native American. Nick, Adam, and Mike are all Caucasian. I don't know their background. Kay is female. Walter is also, I think he's Irish. But what I'm saying is that not only are in our own game table, but when we look at broader game tables, like, there are a lot of people who are not straight white European males playing games. And that's just the reality of the situation. And when I thought about how we do our artwork, it was like, I don't want to do the artwork that's quote in world. I want the artwork to reflect the players,
the people playing the game.
Yeah, wearing the clothing and trappings of that which is in the game. So Um, a lot of games, Warhammer in particular, in the most recent edition, has made some good strides. I think they made some really wise decisions earlier on, and it's reflected in their current artwork as well. Now, granted, their art directors moved on, but I think it's gotten better. But old Warhammer was not that way at all because they knew their demographic. So we spoke earlier about 93% of people who play Zweihander are male. It's just a fact.
Yeah.
But how do we approach new audiences? And the way that you approach new audiences is literally through artwork. It's through the artwork and it's through the writing. And granted, I'm writing from a cis het mostly Caucasian male perspective, but I value inclusivity because being super liberal, by the way, guys. Spoiler alert. I'm a firm believer in equal rights, equal rights are human rights, that whole thing. So my politics aside, I write from that perspective. So in the book, I talk about gender neutrality, they and them, possessive, singular, and plural. That's partially informed by the fact that I believe those are the right terms to use, but also because I'm Chicago manual style. It's how I grew up writing in college, for what few months I spent in college, at least. But that was the way that I was taught and the way I taught myself over time. So the artwork in the book, we maintain a blend, a pastiche, if you will, of different real world races, different complexions and skin tones, different genders and sexes, as best as you can illustrate those in the artwork. And we try our best, as best as we can, for mostly men who are writing this book, to make it as neutral in tone as we possibly can. And that is how I feel about inclusivity in general. And and I agree with the comment earlier about it's a big part of the growing community. Yeah, it absolutely is. And I would even argue that there was a pretty significant number of people in that quote minority, women, African Americans, and others, who were playing D&D, but whose voices were never amplified in the way that they are now with social media. Now they have a platform to speak about their experience and to talk about how include us in this. And the responsibility falls not only to the designers, but also to the artists and the creative vision. I'm a creative director. That's my role and title. And I am ultimately responsible for how we put it out there. As an example, Jean-Jacques Belletalio, I think is the guy's name. He's the guy who did the Deus Ex art design. Every piece of art that went through that shop, he was responsible for. Same thing with me. All the writing, all the line editing, all the proofing, all the artwork, everything that's said about the game, up to and including the marketing messages, must reflect diversity, because it is not only important for me, it is literally a reflection. It is literally in the brand itself. It is within the first 5 pages when we say right there, boom, in that sidebar, gender neutrality, what we're saying, why we're saying it, and why you're seeing it as a reader. And I've said before, some people don't like it, but they can fuck off, because that's the way I write. And I know there are people on 4chan that obviously quibbled about it. I think they're looking for any reason just to fight online. But no, I get annoyed. In the 90s, everybody wrote she, and I was like, that doesn't even make any damn sense, because it felt a little pandering. And two, it was incorrect. The correct terminology, and I knew this even in the 90s in high school. The correct terminology is to use non-gendered they and them, because that's the way I was taught. That's the way I was taught in middle school and high school. And keep in mind, I graduated in 1995, so this is not it's like I've kind of grasped onto this this quote SJW thing in recent years. This is the way I was raised to write, and by Chicago Manual of Style, this is the way that we write, and the standards within it. So I feel we do a pretty good job. Now, some people may disagree, and I think that there's probably more room for improvement. There's always going to be room for improvement. But I think that we've done a fair job. I would really like to see how our demographic spread looks over time, particularly with the new audiences we're attracting. If you look at encounter role play, um, I'm pretty sure that of the players there are two women.
Yeah.
Excuse me, three women. My apologies. Sorry about that, guys. Three women of the group of five. And they're constantly talking about Zweihander online. And I've been watching the show, and it's they're so Will of Encounter Roleplay. If you guys don't know, he's running this series called Black Hearts. The last episode 18, is this Friday, tomorrow. And the story is so cool. I've really been really interested in seeing the way other people play Zweihander that are not men. And it's really interesting to see how these things kind of play out. And I feel like there's some lessons to be learned there, particularly as we look at how we illustrate our books, how we write and tell stories, and how we attract more talent that are female writers. As an example, I think our art designer in the first book was Milena Lakasevich. We have, our proofreader, Jennifer Ford. We have our new art director who's doing the layout for future books, Sierra Stanton. I think that we all have room to improve and grow to bring more people of color and diversity in. I'm a strong advocate of POC consultants. In fact, I've spoken to the gentleman who runs Swordfall, Brandon, about being a POC consultant on Colonial Gothic. And it's not necessarily just to virtue signal, but because it's important. Because if we don't, we can't write in a vacuum, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not doing the work justice by doing that. We have to continue to re-examine the way that we write and the way we illustrate, and it's on us as creators, and especially as now that I feel Zweihander is maturing, it's even more important. So I feel that we'll continue to improve. I mean, there's no doubt about it that it's important to me personally. It's important to me professionally, especially. In case you didn't know, most of the publishing world there's a lot of women in publishing.
Mm-hmm.
And even though what people see online is a lot of men writing RPGs, the reality is the people actually doing the hard work, the heavy lifting, are mostly women, because that's the publishing world in general.
Yeah. Good question. I've got one last question tied to the whole publisher deal and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And it came in today, and it was a good question. I don't know if it's really tied to that. It's just, this is just a general question about the brand. And it got me thinking, and they're right. Is there one place to look going forward for product updates, shipping times, and launches? So they made the comment that it gets posted on social media, it gets posted to the Discord, but it gets lost right away. And I was that's a really good point. Is there one central hub maybe in the future where people can have these dates and it'll always be there? It won't fall off until it's happened.
Yeah. So with respect to Kickstarter, it will always be Kickstarter. Anything that's official, you will see there, and it'll be kept there. In fact, I think I've got an update scheduled for tomorrow to go out and talk about printing and shipping for July, the things we spoke about tonight. But Kickstarter is a go-to place for that. But as for the future, product roadmap, things of that nature, those will be done through probably corporate communications. Okay. There is going to be an effort that will come to fruition, as you've seen with other RPG companies, where you can count on books will be released in stores on end date. That sort of thing comes with having business infrastructure, which Zweihander at this point has been literally ran out of my basement. So with people across the world. So you're going to see there's going to be a strong professional polish put on that, where you'll be able to count on dates, essentially, where following the same streams of the way that Pathfinder and Paizo and D&D and others commit to their product roadmap. You'll see the same thing for us.
Awesome. We got one last comment here. Thanks for fielding our questions. I think Zweihander sounds amazing. I told you I'll run it for you. He said his group can play it. I'll run it for you guys.
Yeah.
His head note. Well, thank you for joining us Tabletop Keyboard. He that's also a streaming channel, and he drops in all the time, so it's awesome.
Oh, cool. That's good.
I'm more than happy to run it for you and your guys anytime.
That's right.
So we are coming up on 3 hours, and that was our questions. So
yeah,
if there's any more in chat you want to quickly get in, otherwise I think we're going to call it a night. People have been dropping off, but we've had quite a lot of viewers. So thank you for everybody who's stopped by, dropped in, asked questions. Thank you, Daniel, for your time sitting here for 3 hours chatting with us. You're a busy guy. You're doing Zweihander full time now. You got Origins in less than a week. You're going to, so it was awesome that you dropped in here to do this. If you guys want to see this maybe again, maybe we want to do something quarterly. I don't know. I haven't really thrown that out to Daniel. I'm putting him on the spot, but maybe we want to make a community Q&A a semi-regular thing. If
that'd be super cool. I'm
for it.
Totally into it. Yeah, 100%.
Cool.
On board.
Awesome. Well, I don't see any more questions, so we'll say goodnight to everybody. Again, thank you so much for joining us. I had a great time. Thank you, Daniel. And I'll be back tomorrow night with Forbidden Lands. So if you guys are interested in that, drop on in. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the questions. Take care now.